Welcome to another Platinum Greatwyrm episode of the It's a Mimic podcast, where you never know what you're going to get. Welcome to a special mailbag episode of the It's a Mimic podcast, where I, Adam, am sitting down with one of our Patreon subscribers, Robert, who has generously become one of our patrons of Platinum Greatwyrm tier. That means that he's able to sit down and record an episode with us, and he decided that today we're going to be discussing West March's style campaigns. But before we get into it, Robert, what inspired you to discuss West March's campaigns? Are you gearing up to run one?
I am gearing up to run one, but that is not what inspired me to discuss it. Couple of things inspired me, and I think you'll commiserate with me on the first one, is I don't really think you've talked about them before. And so, every time I try and do one of these, I try and find something a little original to talk about. There always feels like there's there's unspoken pressure from my own brain of, don't rehash something that's already been done.
Go ahead and rehash. A lot of that stuff was like years ago. So
no, I'll get around to it. So I don't think you guys had really talked about them. And then, to be completely honest, the real reason I wanted to talk about it before I did any research on it was I mistook it for something else. And so I have this kind of irrational pet peeve as a DM where, and I mean completely irrational, where I want my players to explore more than one type of character. And I have players who, because you play 30, 40, 50 sessions as the same character and you're in love with them, and that's great, that's fine. But you just know the next time you start a campaign, you're getting that character 2.0 or their cousin or their brother, and they have almost the same name because that person's comfortable playing that class. Or maybe you have a player who they don't understand what class they're getting into because they're basing it off of some other pop culture reference. They're saying, I can't wait to be a paladin so I can throw my shield at people. It's like, okay, but that's World of Warcraft. That's not D&D. I wanted to look at a game style that would actively encourage players to rotate through a pool of characters. And, I was thinking kind of like those role-playing games. I think Final Fantasy Tactics does it, but Suikoden did it, Disgaea did it, a bunch of them did it, where Final Fantasy, you've got a pool of people, and if you run into a situation where your couple of characters that you like don't really fit, you can switch over to a different group and play them. And when you do that experience, it turns out I'm a terrible paladin. I'm actually a really good bard. Maybe I should have given that a chance, but I never did because I had this mindset of, no, I'm going to play X. And so that's really what I was thinking of. And I did a really cursory Google search, and they're like, oh, that's a West March's campaign. And I said, okay, that's a West March's campaign. I'm going to recommend that as my next topic for It's a Mimic. And then I read about a West March's campaign, and I was like, this sounds hard. Maybe would not fit my particular group of players very well. But I am going to be borrowing elements and pieces from it. It's given me a lot of inspiration. And then back to reason one, I don't know if you guys have talked about it before, so felt like a good area to jump into.
Okay, so I've got a couple of thoughts here, and if you don't mind derailing for a little bit, I'm going to tell everyone else to check the show notes for the time code to jump into the actual West March's discussion, because I've got a little bit of insight on what you're talking about, because I've done something very similar fairly recently, and so we can have kind of a little impromptu conversation about that first, and then jump into the West March's if you'd like.
Oh, absolutely. We are riding the Tangent Express, so let's.
It's funny that you say that, and that is going to be a hilarious joke in about 2 minutes. But first, I want to point out that we have discussed West March's before on the podcast. However, it was always a cursory mention in another episode focused on something else, usually a DM tips episode where we'll sit there and be talking about campaign styles, which I believe was in the first 50 episodes, where we talked about Sandbox versus Railroad versus Funhouse. And I believe West March's was brought up in passing, right? I have discussed it kind of briefly in other DM tips episodes more recently. But like I say, I bounce off of it, and the other hosts don't really engage with the idea of West March's because I don't think anyone on the podcast has played that style of campaign before.
Well, it's a fairly difficult campaign to. I mean, when you look at when we get into it, the factors of it, it sounds like a really difficult thing to do for a lot of reasons, but also And I mean, I fall very squarely into this category. Your quote unquote casual D&D player and the ones who run modules and run published works, there aren't really. I mean, there sort of are published works for West Marches, but not really, right? I mean, there are ones that kind of feel like it, but there's no like, here is the West Marches style book that fits neatly into all this stuff.
If I can be perfectly honest, now I haven't looked at it yet because that's going to come in a month or so by the time I get around to it. But D&D Beyond just released one-shot wonders. There are 3 that they've released. One is for forests, one is for coasts, and one is for, I think, deserts. And the idea is that each one of these publications has 10 mini one-shot adventures in it for different levels of play that take place in the same kind of location, right? That feels like that could be adapted to be a West Marches campaign, right? Because it's these little, like isolated but still kind of connected. You'd have to figure out the connective tissue for the overall plot, but like that feels like a place where I might start. And I feel like you could take any one of the anthologies, like the Quest for the Infinite Staircase, or Radiant Citadel, or Candlekeep Mysteries,
Portal,
yeah. And you could run that West Marches style if you do a lot of heavy lifting yourself as a DM. But before we get into West Marches,
right,
let's talk about we're going on the Tangent Express, as you said. And the reason that was funny was because I did this pool of characters idea with the Call of Cthulhu game, Horror on the Orient Express. So which is actually should have been called the Tangent Express. I believe it is Zan in our Patreon Discord who's actively running it right now, and he has discovered, which is what I discovered, that this campaign was, I think there's something like 19 or 21 or something different chapters in it. Each one is a different stop on the train, right? Where you're going across Europe you start in London and take a ferry to Paris. You go all the way over to Constantinople, and you keep stopping and getting off the train to put together the next piece of the mystery. Then you put together the next clue. But when this was originally published, there were only like a handful of actual stops. Call of Cthulhu is on the 7th edition, which means every time that they release a new edition, they re-release this adventure, this campaign, and they add a couple of stops here and there. So it's written by different people. They're all like a flashback episode or a dream sequence, or they have nothing to do with the main plot. And it's really difficult to maintain the continuity and keep the players focused on what the overarching bad guy is, right? Like what is their mission statement? What's their goal? It's very hard to stay on topic with that. So it is just an express of a million different tangents, kind of train themed mostly. Some of them aren't. Some of them are you get off a train and you go do this thing and then you get back on the train at the end. Or you're going to flash back 30 years. One of you is, and the NPC that is like your initial patron that sent you off on this, we're going to do a flashback to his life. So you all need to write up brand new characters to find out how he discovered that the supernatural exists. It has nothing to do with any of the campaign, except it's one recurring NPC, right? And so as I was digging into it, and I knew we'd have to write other characters and whatnot, I also discovered that it's Call of Cthulhu, which means it's deadly, but this one has some reputation for being particularly deadly, especially because you're on a clock and your players are going to be rushed because you have to solve it before you get back on the train.
Now, do you use the Ticket to Ride board to...
No, actually, when we bought it, we also got the digital pack, and it came with a bunch of color maps and whatnot that we printed out on cardstock, and they're hanging up all over my office still, even though we haven't played. It's been on permanent hiatus now for a couple of years. But it's interesting because you'll get like London, capital of the British Isles, is the one that you get in chapter 1. But then in one of the flashbacks, it's London, fog-bound seat of empire, and like you get different versions of the same city. And like it's actually a really decent campaign, but it's dense, and you've got to do a lot of heavy lifting as the keeper. But when I realized that we had to be making extra characters and that it would be incredibly deadly and that we would need different skill sets because it was written by different writers with different focuses.
You would
need different skill sets for different adventures. And so I had to teach all of my players how to build a character in the first place. So I said, hey, we're going to build the first one together into session 0. And then before you go home, we're going to build the skeleton for 3 more, and it'll be your homework to flesh them out. So every character came to the table with four every player came with 4 characters. And then when it was time to get on the Express, we just got 3 train cars added to the back of it. I just gave them a rich benefactor. And I said, here, all of your player characters exist here. Anytime there is an adventure, you choose the character you want to go off into the city. If they die, they die, and we can introduce a new one later. But now you have this pool of resources that you can use, because otherwise we're going to just fuck up this entire campaign over and over again. So, and
it's so, I think when you describe it of like, we get off in this stop and there's a thing to do and there's a solution, and it's a flashback and there are different characters, and you go to a different stop and you do all of these different stops, and you're like, wait a minute, what was the overarching plot? I think back to the glory days of like the X-Files, hey, monster of the week, 10 more monsters of the week. Oh, by the way, Smoking Man. Oh, right. I remember that guy. Yeah. He hasn't been around for 15 episodes. What's his fucking deal again? I can't remember. Something about aliens. Oh, right. Aliens. Okay. But the next episode is the guy who, when he dies, he comes back because his tumors regenerate or something like that. Or, the circus guy who's got the conjoined twin that gets out and kills people. And it's like, okay, those are all neat. Those are all little interesting vignettes. The fuck is going on here? And now you introduce losing even that string of the same characters every time. Like if you did X-Files where every single episode was the X-Files, but you didn't have Mulder and Scully, it's like, well, what the fuck's going on? And I can see how,
it was particularly frustrating in that campaign as well, because there's a really solid plot that runs through it. And you start off at the very beginning, there's all this backstory about there's these different cults, right? And only one of them is evil, but they're masquerading as another kind of cult, right? And so you've got your big bad guy, who, by the way, is not really a big bad guy, and he disappears at one point. But his father ran the cult, and it was his father that still has. I never read the end of the campaign. It was like 700 pages between 2 books. But like, I think his father is the big bad at the end, but you're introduced to the son, and then there's like 11 chapters. Every chapter is multiple sessions, right? Where you're not dealing with the cults at all, right? You're dealing with other supernatural aspects, train related nonsense, and it was a lot of work for me to tie it all together. But not necessarily to just spend all this time bitching about a Call of Cthulhu campaign that I would write differently.
We're talking about cults. That cults are near and dear to my heart. So
yes, and I know that the last time we spoke, we got 2/3 of the way through building a cult, and we'll get back to cults the next time that we record. But the big thing the big takeaway was my players really enjoyed the opportunity to have a pool of characters and choose which one is going on this adventure, and try to figure out what skill set's going to be needed, what the party makeup is going to look like, what vibe are they in the mood for tonight, right? And there were some players that latched onto one and loved that and had the others as backup if this one dies. But there were others, Terry and Dave and Kyle, were really sitting back going, I could pick just about anybody, hey? Okay, do I want to be the old-timey wrestler, or do I want to be my firefighter, or should I be a retired detective? Or I've got one guy that's just surprisingly Russian, because I made that decision. And we're heading into, like, I know we got to meet someone.
It's fun to do the accent.
Yeah, and sometimes it's fun to do the accent, or we're going to go meet an NPC with a name that sounds like this. I should pull out this character background for it, right? It's time to go meet our rich benefactor. Let's send our rich people to go meet with them, right? So we can do high society. That was a lot of fun, and I actually really highly recommend that style of play if you're doing a more casual game, or if your overarching plot doesn't require your player characters to be the linchpin of it, right? The thing with Dungeons and Dragons, generally speaking, is you get these backstories or you build these characters, and then personal things happen to these characters, and they become ingrained in the system. The big bad evil guy has a personal vendetta against the party's fighter, right? So now you want the fighter in the campaign.
Yes, you decided that the one and only orphan that ever shows up in a D&D campaign, you have decided, it turns out that the dragon killed their parents.
Exactly.
Oh, now I'm looped in,
And so then when it comes time to kill the dragon, you know which character you're bringing meaning to this, right? And so if you have one character that's tied to all of the plot points, you're never going to bring anybody else. So it almost needs to be a little bit more casual as far as the dungeon master's perspective on not tying it. Like, we need 4 heroes, doesn't matter who, right? And you've really got to kind of keep that thought process, not only for this is a great segue, but also for West March's campaigns, right?
Right.
So you're going to be running a campaign that has multiple characters for each player?
Yes, that's the goal. So do you want to hear about that? Do you want to hear about a little bit of the background of what I'm going to do?
Yeah. And then we can jump into the actual topic for the episode. But yes, I absolutely do.
So this is convoluted. I'm going to lead that right now. It's a little convoluted. And the idea for the campaign has come from 100 different places. One, I wanted to somehow make a treant the bad guy or deeply involved as kind of the villain, because I find treants interesting, and I don't think plants really get their time to shine, even though they're fucking fascinating in the real world, and a treant is a decent CR, and so you can do something with that. And then I'm really, really fascinated by kind of not mythology. I love mythology. If you play the trivia on our Discord server, I would, to the winners, routinely send a mythological book of their choice. Slavic mythology, Aztec mythology, wide variety of mythologies, and I find them really interesting. And one of the things I love about them, or I find fascinating, is what I'm going to call kind of the mythos. You are mythos of all of the different kind of almost primordial myths that recur over and over again in people who are widely displaced from each other. A very good example is the deluge myth. So many cultures have a myth about the world is destroyed by a flood, but one dude or something builds a boat. Snakes show up in mythology a lot, or giants. Giants almost always show up as the enemy. You've got the giants in Norse mythology that the Aesir and the Vanir are killing. You've got Goliath from David and Goliath. He was a giant Philistine. I think the Philistines were a race of giants, but I'm not super up on that. You got Humbaba from Gilgamesh. I mean, pick a mythology, heroes kill giants. That's what they do.
Yep.
And so I wanted to find a way to kind of roll a bunch of these mythological ideas together. And I also wanted a way to sort of blatantly just steal from, adventures and stuff, things to do from mythology, because they are better writers than I am. They are thousands of years of being distilled down into good, interesting stories. So steal from them. So I decided to create sort of a way to do that. And, cosmologically speaking, in my universe, it begins with a vast watery abyss. The entire universe is just a watery abyss. That comes from the Egyptian belief of what's called Nun. And then growing out of that watery abyss is an unimaginably large twisted tree. So we have Yggdrasil, the world tree.
Yes.
In its branches, the leaves are going to be made of the elemental planes: fire, water, earth, etc. Those are in the branches of the tree, and swimming through the void around the tree is an equally immense snake, the rainbow snake. I need to look more into that, but I believe that's the progenitor from Aboriginal mythology of Australia. And it is a rainbow snake because as it flies around the tree, it passes through the planes, and its scales pick up colors based on that plane: red and orange for the plane of fire, blues and greens, plane of water, etc. And when the snake needs to shed its skin, it does so by brushing against the tree to help slough off the skin. So the very first time it did this, it brushed against the spot on the tree high up where the branches spur off the trunk, leaving it shed skin behind. Well, that shed skin became the realm of the gods. That is the elemental plane of, where the gods live, Celestia, I think. But the snake found that it was too close to the elemental planes, and that irritated its soft new scales. So the next time it needed to do this, it passed through the tree of the trunk, further the actual trunk of the tree further down where there was a gap near the base. It shed its skin, but that spot was too tight and was uncomfortable. Well, that shed skin formed the Feywilds. And so it goes on and on of this snake shedding its skin by brushing against places on the world tree, creating the Shadowfell underneath the tree, creating kind of the hells deep beneath the tree and then the astral sea. And then finally it found the most pleasant place to do it was on the roots of the tree themselves. And so when it would pass by the root and slough off its skin, that now is creating a material world, the material plane. And every time it does that, every shedding would form a new world. And so I would use those to kind of create different mythological worlds connected by the roots of this tree, connected by the tree itself. So, and that's how each of the worlds have some elements of the planes, is because the snake is passing through the planes, picking up elements of fire, water, earth, etc., and then sloughing off its skin as it's being reborn to then swim again through the cosmos, if you will. And so that's the kind of the cosmology, the background. And when my campaign starts, they're going to be in basically Theros. I'm just going to, it's going to be ancient Greece, Theros. But about 4 or 5 sessions in, the bad guys they never even knew about are going to succeed in their plan of trying to, or partially succeed in their plan of trying to awaken the world tree as a treant to get it to leave where it is, destroying all the plants, and settle somewhere else and start a whole new universe. And as the giant roots of the tree, metaphorical or not, are moving about, that's what's going to cause the flood. And so I am going to destroy the world they're in with a massive flood, and they are going to crash land onto an island where they're going to need to build a settlement, and there will be new islands cropped up, things from the bottom of the ocean cropped up, former vestiges of civilization now buried or destroyed to explore, and also there will be the ability to travel between the worlds that had previously been on the roots of the tree. So if they want to go from Theros to a form of mythological ancient Japan or Babylon or Egypt, that is now possible. And so I'm going to destroy the world, set up a rough map of all these things they can go do, and then they can go and do them. And I don't really have an overarching plot. Maybe they can figure out what actually happened, but there's no way to save the world because it was already destroyed. It's Ozymandias at the end of Watchmen turning on the television. It's already fucking happened. So yeah. That's my going in concept.
Have you read The Hero's Journey by Joseph Campbell?
Yes. Well, have I? I have it on my list of ones to read. But
you're familiar with it, right?
I am, yeah.
We did a whole ass episode about it, 4 years ago or something. But
that's where I first heard about it, and I bought most of the books you referenced in that episode to help me become a better DM.
It's funny. I don't consider them to be necessary DM material, but I think that they are necessary storyteller material, right? So the average DM that's just running a module, yeah, you could probably get away without doing any of this research. But if you really want to elevate your game, those are great resources, right? So, but I highly recommend it. If you like archetypes from mythology, that is kind of the grandfather. It's one of the seminal views of how we deal with main characters and heroes, right? It doesn't really get into more broader mythologies like creation myths or anything. It gets into it's specifically the hero's journey, right?
Right.
It's definitely worth checking out. So you're going to build this world, and you want to add, or you want to destroy the world actually, and then you want to add to have the players just have different characters in different settings, or are they all in the same setting? Or
so they're going to the original concept is going to be that the characters themselves are your traditional concept of Greek heroes who are being summoned essentially to go and do the Trojan War. So I'm going to ask my players to give me one and a backup character, maybe another one. And then on the way back from the Trojan War, that's when the deluge happens, and they find themselves along with a couple hundred other people, the remnants of the Armada, and the heroes crashed onto an uncharted island of sorts, and then they've got to build a settlement. And so I wanted them to have, some skin in the game, some interest in what the settlement's going to do and in the home they're going to have. And so that's going to be where they and their other backup heroes are going to be. But then when they discover the other worlds are available, I'm going to say, I know that Greek mythology is not everybody's bag here, but all of my players are interested in mythology in general. So if they want to create a hero archetype from one of those mythologies to then incorporate into this settlement that, is exploring the map and trying to find a way to, better survive and connect with the rest of the worlds, they can do that. And I was going to I'm not going to say force, but I was going to kind of push the idea of having backup characters by every time they go out to do something, there will be areas they can't necessarily get into for whatever reason. It's going to be very Legend of Zelda style, like you need to get this thing to unlock that zone. For their boat or whatever method of conveyance they have. And so when the main characters are off doing whatever the exploration in the spot is, I'm going to encourage them to take the other characters with them to do a side one shot, side two shot of going and finding, I don't know, the screens they need for their boat so they can pass through the really smoky area, the elemental they need to capture so they can make the boat fly, things like that. And then I'm also going to throw in events happening back at the settlement. And so if the settlement comes under attack, they'll have characters there to then jump into while their quote unquote mains are away. So we're kind of creating, multiple areas to get them to play, try out different characters and, see which fits, see which they want to play with.
An interesting thing to add to that would be something along the lines of, in order for them to accomplish something in their, material plane, they would need something in another material plane to get set up or lined up or killed or whatever. And so they can communicate with the other side, but they can't get there. So we're going to send that communication out. In 2 weeks, everybody come back with a character that they think would be an appropriate hero for this kind of mission in this campaign setting, right?
Yeah, we're going to send out a whole bunch of astral seagulls with notes tied to their tentacle or whatever, and see who responds. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a really good idea.
I really like that idea. I love the idea of every time that we play a one shot with my table. It's always set in the same world, and it always has something to do with the overall plot. But it's just I pick a random point on the map that my players don't know they're getting into. They roll up new characters, and then it's a fucking meat grinder, and they see what they're going to get to, how they're going to impact things, and then when we return to the main campaign, they will see the ripples, the echoes of this over the next session or two, right? So that kind of feels the same vibe-ish. We do it out of necessity because people are away, so we run one shots.
Right.
But
I did something similar where I was playing Curse of Strahd, and I've talked about it, I think, before in the campaign where I did what I called campfire stories, where, I would just get a feel from the players of they're interested in the game still, but they're kind of tired of showing up every week or two just to be sad and miserable for 3 hours because it's fucking Barovia, right? Like, if every time you go camping, it's raining and your tent has a hole in it and a bear kills you, you're not going to enjoy camping. So we set up where about every, 4 or 5 sessions, I would have one of the players have written a little, quote unquote, one shot based on the background of their character. And so the idea would be they're sitting around the campfire and one of them says, one time this crazy thing happened to me. And then they would describe like the event that led them to being the class they are, or just something from their background. And I would have that player, if they wanted to run it, they could run it. They'd actually DM it. And 2 of them took me up on that. So that was nice. That was a nice break. But I would also have them give like rough ideas of characters from their main character's background that then the other players would jump in and play. And so it gave the players a chance of, a completely safe environment, which is rare in Barovia or any Domain of Dread, because it doesn't matter if the character they're playing as lives or dies. It's a story being told. All that matters is the one character survives. And so we would play those, and they seem to really enjoy them. Giving them a break from Barovia and trying out new things was really fun. But also, it then helped to flesh out the characters' backstories a little bit. And so the role play got a little bit better because now the other characters could reference something that had happened in that storyteller's background, or that storyteller had a new element of something dramatic or important had happened in their past that they themselves hadn't written, but another player had come up with. And so it really leaned on the collaborative storytelling of the form, which was nice. But yeah, I find finding ways to inject those one shots, 1, 2, 4 shots into a game really helps to, kind of break up the monotony, but also reinvigorate people of like, oh man, I can't wait to go back and play my whatever now. So
yeah. Like I really like the idea of multiple characters for a player. But let's jump into West Marches specifically now, which is kind of the opposite idea of multiple players, each with one character.
Yeah. So, like I said, this was some bad Googling on my part, but I still think it's really interesting. Yeah, people have heard us say West Marches a couple dozen times now, and they probably are wondering, well, what the fuck is a West Marches campaign? These guys have been talking for 30 minutes and haven't defined it. So a West Marches campaign was developed around 2006 by a man named Ben Robbins, who is a game developer known for the games Microscope and Kingdom. I have not played either of them, but his website is still up. I think they're still running. He's got a website, lamemage.com, where you can go and see his views on things. You can learn about Kingdom, you can learn about Microscope and his other games, and also you can verify everything I'm about to say because I stole a lot of the notes from his website. So the West Marches style of game is actually named after a campaign of the same name that Ben ran for about 2 years. It took place on the edge of civilization in a place simply called the West Marches. The marches themselves were a wilderness into which the PCs would routinely adventure, leaving out from, the only safe haven, this one town on the edge of the wilderness. So the characters would adventure out of the town, but they would always return to the town between adventures. And PCs, the player characters could explore wherever they wanted to go, as long as they were not going back east to civilization. So anywhere on the map they would be free to go, just could not go back to civilization. And in the town they were in, the characters were the only adventurers. So they were the only adventurers in the town. And so there were some factors, and again, this comes from Ben Robbins himself, as to what led to kind of developing the game. So some of the factors are there was no regular scheduled time. Every session was scheduled by the players on the fly. That sounds awful to me. But another factor, I'm thinking about the scheduling ability of a group of adults to get something done routinely. And there's just as there are archetypes in a D&D game, just as there are classes in a game, there are classes of players. And one of the players or the DM is the scheduler. And they are right up there as one of the most fucking important people, is the person who says, hey, the Google Calendar invite is out. Tell me yes or no. Are we playing on this day, et cetera, et cetera. But another factor was there was no regular party at these games that Ben was running. Each game had different players drawn from a pool of around 10 to 14 people. And I listened to a video by Matt Colville about this, and he was commiserating. And he's like, God, Ben Robbins has solved a problem that I've had with this West Marches style. And I was like, I've never met a DM who has a problem of 10 to 14 people wanting to play. That's a shit ton of people. Normally it's you're trying to find people, but
hold on. I'm going to put a caveat on that. I have probably 17 people in my life that want to play D&D with me. My problem is that none of them are willing to commit to it. Right.
Okay.
And that's the difference. Is I have, I think, 2 people waiting for a free spot at my table. I almost always have 2 or 3 people sitting there going, well, if a spot ever opens up, I'd love to play, right? But then you end up with the I can only play on weeknights, and then so I can only commit. I'm heading into finals week. I'm only going to be able to commit some amount of time, or I'll play, but not with that person, right? It just gets complicated, right? So but I agree with you. Most people, you can't find 4 people to commit, but I can always find a dozen people who want to commit once, right?
And I think that the more I'm reading about it and the more I thought about it, the West Marches feels a lot like the Adventure League pickup games that you find. It's 15 people showed up and 20 people agreed to play, and 7 actually brought characters, and of those 7, 3 brought dice and pencils. Okay, these are who's playing, So there was no regular party. Each game had different players drawn from a pool of around 10 to 14 people, and one of the things explained in that Matt Colville video was, the people that played were the ones who were kind of interested in what had been found on the map and what was going on. And that leads into the next major point is, in a West Marches campaign, there is no regular plot. There's no overarching goal of there's an evil cult somewhere bringing back Tiamat, or there's somebody trying to turn everybody in the land into flumps, or whatever. There's no plot. The players drive what's going to happen. They decide where to go and what to do. True sandbox game. So, the West Marches required a immense amount of outside of game communication, and it would involve, going out on the text group or the email chain or the whatever and saying like, hey guys, we want to play on Saturday. I looked at the map of the area, and I really want to explore that, jaguar-shaped temple in the northwest. And then 3 or 4 other people would say, yeah, I really want to do that. Or they would say, no, I don't really want to do that. Let me know when the next thing comes around and I'll jump in. And then after that's, announced of what 1 or 2 people really want to do, that's how you would get your group of interested players to then jump in on that. And then they would coordinate between each other to schedule the time. So it's a reverse of the factors that I mentioned, but those are kind of the major ones, completely sandbox, groups of different players and characters, and the characters drive both the game and the schedule. Players drive the game and schedule.
Can you imagine trying to do this pre-internet, where it's all message boards in comic book stores?
I mean, I can't. God, no. Good on Ben. This happened in 2006, so he had some help. But I imagine like the only way this would happen is maybe at a convention, like at Gen Con or something, or Gary Con, where people are told bring your characters, and then there's a bunch of tables set up, and someone raises their hand and says, "I'm going to be killing were-rats," and someone says, "Good, I want to do that," and someone says, "I'm going to be reenacting Survivor." Okay, I want to go do that, and like maybe that, but that's very one-off.
If I can be honest, that's how it used to be when you needed to find D&D players. That's how, like, that's the origins of Dungeons and Dragons in like original D&D was, Gygax and his friends. But then as they handed out their little brown books to everybody to be like, hey, look at our gaming system. And he was getting phone calls at home from people being like, what's the ruling on this and shit like that. It was all done through message boards. You'd put together a group for a single dungeon crawl.
Like,
this dungeon crawl is going to have a Sphinx in it. Who's in? And then people would sign up, and you would get on the phone and be like, all right, we're going to meet at this time. Like it was so wild to me, like that they had to do this back in the day. And now we're looking at this reinvigorated sense of the same ideas here. 30 years later, Ben Robbins came up with this, and now 20 years after that, we're sitting here going, oh wow, look at this cool thing that happened, right? Like a cool way of playing D&D that never occurred to me. I'm like, you go to the OG guys, this sounds like, yes man, that's just Dungeons and fucking Dragons.
Right. Yeah, this was literally the like college club bulletin board.
Exactly.
One corner of it was D&D with little tearaway strips, with a time and a date, and people showed up, or you were the guys that took over a corner of the campus dining hall because they had coffee and chocolate milk and pizza all night. And you're like, this is it, guys. We're going to go over here and we're going to laugh our asses off, and people are going to stare at us like we're weirdos on a Friday night. Or, everybody else is going to be out at the club or whatever, and we're going to be enjoying math. That is not meant to be derogatory. My best fucking times I had in college were at our 24-hour dining hall in the corner, laughing our asses off, arguing over who would win in a fight, Brock Samson or Darth Vader. So
I'm giving this to Brock, by the way.
Brock won it. So God, okay. Tangent Express, stop number 2. All getting off. The battles, as we called them, we did, characters and locations, and there was a tiered system to get to the final, and Brock Samson beat it might have been Ash from Army of Darkness. Now that I think about it, Ash from Army of Darkness beat Darth Vader in a fight on the Hindenburg as it was crashing, because that was the location. And we determined that because it happened in our world away from where the midichlorians were, the force was reduced. And also, if you're deep into your Star Wars lore, you'll know that alchemically you can treat something so that it can be lightsaber resistant. And fuck if Ash didn't have a chemistry book in the trunk of his car that he used to make gunpowder back then, so he figured out how to do that, and well, that's all she wrote.
Yeah, and I don't care how great your armor is, Captain Respirator, but this is a fucking chainsaw. So
a chainsaw and a boomstick. I mean, you can deflect lasers, but here's the lead. I love the Tangent Express. It's my favorite train.
Anyway, back to
the West Marches. So So those were the primary factors from Ben. And then doing some more research, I found a few other things that, again, the game tended to include. One was session reports, information about experiences or things that happened, things that had gone on in the campaign, the adventure, were passed to every participant in the campaign, whether they were present or not. So, I mean, all the other adventurers would be back in the tavern or somewhere, and, somebody would come in and say, "Did you hear what they did?" and pass out information. And they would update the big map on the wall, which leads into the next, a shared geographical map. Could be in universe, like a treasure map. I think Matt Colville mentioned in his video that somebody had simply carved a map of the region into the table at the bar to make everybody go back to the tavern because they didn't want to carry the table around. And interestingly enough, that map could be unreliable. And so that would be a way to provide initial hooks to players, is to have this giant quote unquote treasure map of explored and unexplored places with notes. And the players would make notes after their adventures about those locations as kind of part of their session reports. Additionally, I think crops up a lot in West Marches, competition between players, and I'm imagining player groups, was actively encouraged, particularly if players' ambitions and insecurities made them go on more adventures. So you would have, Group A and Group B and Group C sort of competing with each other. Hey, by the way, did you hear that Group B went and explored the Jaguar Temple? Well, fuck, I wanted to explore the Jaguar Temple, but my cat had a bris that day, so I couldn't play. God damn it. So now I need to play more so I can go and explore the shit on the map I want to explore. And then, hey, if I were a fellow player, you better believe I'm lying on that fucking map for the people outside of my adventuring campaign. Why? It's funny. In fact, everybody should look up. There's a really famous D&D joke about the head of Vecna. Have you heard that one?
Oh, yes. As a matter of fact, I think we outlined it on one episode, like
Yeah.
70 episodes ago or something.
Yeah. So the head of Vecna, great joke, very much from this of competing player groups. And then lastly, and this should be very familiar with anybody that's played like an MMORPG or any sort of, game with a big map, is the further you get from your town or home base, the further you go away, the more dangerous and rewarding the encounters are likely to be. That's not a strict rule. I mean, high-level enemies can be closer to home or come closer to home, chasing back the players, figuring stuff out, or maybe the players left an area too long and something festered and got more dangerous. But that's pretty traditional of, you've got you're created here in town, and then here's your starting zone around town. That's for levels 1 to 5, and then once you kill this pig man, you can get past the whatever and go to levels 5 through 7, and there's another town. And yeah, so this is relying, these factors are relying a lot on, and I'm not saying this is uncommon, I'm just saying that as a 40-year-old man with a full-time job and a demonic child, the level of engagement and homework being done by the players is a lot. They're scheduling the time, they're deciding on where they want to go, they're creating their own parties, they're picking from characters, and they're then coming back and giving, session reports and updating of maps between sessions. That's a lot of work.
Yeah, but you know what? That's the work the DM does. It's nice to spread the wealth a bit.
Like as a DM, that all seems amazing to me, except for the no regular time, because I just imagine like I would open my door and like 6 people would be standing there with a 12-pack of Coke and a bag of Doritos saying, "Are you ready to go explore the Temple of the Hidden Monkey?" And what? Yeah, sure, come on in. But it is nice that it is very player driven. I
just want to be clear, just before we go too much further, that I have played Hide the Monkey, and it's not something I want my friends with Doritos to show up and partake in.
I mean, it depends. Did you leave the light on the porch? Did you put out the blue pig, or what?
Quick, yeah, that might be on me for not turning the light off.
Quick tangent. I was in a work situation where somebody was led to believe they had several other people at work living in their neighborhood, and they were casually led to believe that it was a swingers neighborhood.
Lovely.
And they walked this guy down and they got him really believing it. And then behind his back, and they told him the whole, like, if there's a red light on the porch, that means it's at 7 p.m. on Friday. Hey, it's go time. Break out the fishbowl for the keys and the lube. And then they didn't tell him, but they told a bunch of other people there was going to be a barbecue at his house at 7 p.m. on a Friday. And then somebody went over at like 6 that day or during the day and swapped out his light bulb. And so he, got a knock on the door, and there were like 30 people standing there. And he's like, what the hell? And he saw his light, and he thought that he had accidentally been designated for the swingers house. Basically had a heart attack. I mean, like,
yeah. Oh, that's beautiful.
It's a good harmless prank to play on somebody. Yeah. Anyways, yeah. So these are all of the kind of the factors leading into it. Obviously, as we've also said, the players are not necessarily encouraged to have different characters, but it does create a very good scenario, very good air for or environment, pardon me, for doing that, for being able to swap between characters, because you're starting and stopping in the same place every time. So do you, in your knowledge of West Marches, do you know any others, or do you have anything you want to drop anchor and pontificate on any of these factors?
The big thing that it occurred to me as we're sitting here talking that I'm actually running a West Marches campaign at the moment, and I didn't realize it. Because I'm running a game of Perils and Princesses, which is a very simplistic Disney style game, and I'm running it for all the ladies of It's a Mimic plus 2 other players. And at some point for the Patreon, I will get into this whole thing, but I'm still a few months off of being done. But the idea is that I provided them a map. They all wrote up the characters. I provided them a map, and they have all chosen different places on the map they're interested in. And then depending on availability, I say, all right, what is the most common place on the map that these people want to go to? And then we go do that, right?
Yeah, give me your ranked choice 1 through 4, what you want to do.
That's exactly it, right?
Yeah.
That was part of the session 0 homework they had to do. And so we've been running around at different parts of the map. And the first one was going to this little Fey forest. And the second one was going to, they thought they were going to go fight giants, but it's turned out to actually be devils, because they went up they befriended a giant who walked them up a mountain to where devils are, right? So
fucking giants, man, I tell you.
I really wanted to flip the script on the giants and like have him be a friendly guy, right? So and he's also like the one giant in the area. But we've been having a fucking blast with it, and it's just run through a Discord server where it's 7 ladies and me, and it is absolutely unhinged. I've never seen a fairy tale get so sexual so quickly with this group. You can imagine that Peps, Elwin, and Megan take it those places. Casey are no better. But
I had a friend that before coming to college had worked as Cinderella at a certain big park, and she said the people who are the characters are they live in a dormitory all together, and oh boy, the lesbianics that happen after hours are just I worked in a small theme park, and we did many events and whatnot, and I'll tell you that if you used to have mascots or even just workers that work in the same area, that kind of live in the same area, that are putting in these long hours, it's us versus the public. It gets incestuous quickly. There's a lot of hookups across a lot of different age ranges and backgrounds and everything, and everyone is hooked up with like half of the other people. It's wild. But there's something about putting on that goofy suit that just makes you want to fuck. I don't know what it is. The furries probably got it right on this one.
Well, see, the thing was, I was a clown, and then they see those clown shoes, they know what that means, right?
Right.
So anyway, no, so I've been running this, and it has been a fucking blast doing this, because the only cohesive thought is in the last 14 days from the very first session, it started off the first in the last 14 days, all of the royal families all across the land fell into a deep slumber, except for you 7 princesses. Each one of you has a fairy godmother that will send you a vision, and then you have to get together with the other fairy princesses, figure out what that vision means, and it will lead you to a place on the map. So you don't even know where you're going yet, because you gave me this list from months ago. I've put together the adventure. You got to figure out where you're going on the map. Then it's the journey to get there. Then it's a mildly small adventure, and then it is you solve the problem, and you push back the darkness and the evil in the world just a little bit more. So I've given them a continent to explore, right, with just a bunch of random shit that I labeled on it with whatever I was in the mood for then, right? And a lot of the stuff didn't have a plot to it. It's just, I will call this the Blue Hollows. I don't know what the fuck that means. If they're all interested in the Blue Hollows, I will figure that shit out when we get there. But it has been so much fun as a DM to run that kind of shit and to open it up to people. I think traditionally West Marches games would also have multiple DMs running different, like you said, running
Yes.
different adventures in different places. But just being the forever DM with all of these different players, choosing different adventures that have nothing to do with each other. They go, they succeed, they win. Everyone gets a minor magical item, and they to add to their princess horde, and they're happy. It has been such a wonderful break from the apocalyptic Dungeons and Dragons that I've been running for the last couple of years.
Right.
And I love it. It's so refreshing. And
I
every once in a
mean,
while we want to do something that's like grim fairy tale, so it goes real dark and creepy. That's great too.
and this is a weird thing to say about the structure of any sort of D&D game or any of these games. It honestly makes almost more sense. It makes way more sense that there's just a bunch of fucking random adventures and a bunch of random places to go, and there's things to do, and you get better at it. Because you look back through the various, the heroes that we are basing this off of various mythologies, and there's rarely actually an overarching plot of those mythologies. There's just, he went and did this, and she went and did that, and then they killed the thing, and then they caught the pig, and then they blah, blah, blah. And it was good, and they were heroes. That's it. And and it also just makes so much more goddamn sense, because how many fucking D&D games start with the adventurers in a bar, and somebody comes in and says, I need somebody to go and catch my cow, and then they catch the cow, and the next thing they're doing is they're standing in front of the fucking king, and the king says, oh, I heard you're the great adventurers who saved the cow. Can you go on this quest to save the universe and slay the dragon? I'm level 2, dude. No, don't you have people for this? Like, and it's also that it lets the players say, letting the players kind of drive where they're going and what they're doing makes it so that when you dangle those gigantic save the world, the universe is going to end plot hooks in front of them, they can look at you and say, that's fucking insane. I'm not going to do that. I don't want to do that. I'm going to go over here and catch more pigs, or whatever it was I was doing before. Like, I'm going to go do what I want to do, not get dragged into this I'm going to die thing that's going to see me away from my home for years, right? So you mentioned that you're having a lot of fun because you don't really have an overarching plot, and they're kind of giving you where they want to go, and you got these adventures, and that leads really cleanly. That's a wonderful segue into pros and cons.
Sure.
So as everything, there are pros and cons, and there are a lot of pros and cons with the West Marches style. And I got to be honest, this is not like clean cut black and white pros and cons where there's a clear dichotomy. This is very much, what's your point of view as a player and as a DM, because some of these pros and some of these cons could be they're the opposite, depending on how you want to do the game. So going into the pros first, it's said to be easier on the DM because you don't have to have an overarching plot. You don't have to have a clean, logical narrative. You don't have to leave these hints and make sure the players get them, and they're subtle or they're ham-fisted to get them from point A to point B to point C to saving the world. And that's go ahead.
Sorry. In the same vein, the other big thing that like to make it easier on the DM is every time there's a new book that comes out that has some sort of bestiary in the back of it, and I start looking at it, I find a really cool creature. I really want to pull out the Elder Brain Dragon. I'm desperate to do that, but I have nowhere in my campaign to put this. In West Marches, doesn't matter. I can do that.
Yeah. I mean, your campaign is all about the undead, or it's about stopping the rays of Tiamat, or for God's sake, we're finally going to go kill all these Holophants because I'm just tired of them. But I really want to get that Elder Brain Dragon in there. Yeah, let me get the crowbar out and do some brain surgery and sandwich it in. No, it makes it a lot easier. And honestly, a lot of times when we're coming up with these big plots, and you do see these in the printed stuff all the time, you've got a great start, you got a great ending, and you can't quite figure out how to get that middle bit. And sometimes you're trying to rely on the players to figure that out for you, and that doesn't really work very well. So yeah, being able to get away from that need for a point A to point D and just let the players do what they want to do, it can be easier on the DM. Now, it can also be a lot harder on the DM And we'll get to that in the cons. But another pro is the safe haven or the town that everybody is departing from to go on their adventures and then come back to. So one thing I've noticed in a lot of the pre-written modules I've run, Storm King's Thunder, Curse of Strahd, etc., is your players are truly hobos and are just traveling the map and have no home to go to. And every time they enter a new town, that town is just a new encounter of potential dangers. Sure, there's a shop to buy things in. Sure, there's an inn or a tavern to go do some humorous stuff in. But there's some sort of underlying evil plot, and the players can never really let their guard down. And so having a safe haven or a town that, is the defined, this is the place, actually can open up a lot of narrative options for your character involving in world building. Also, just having a place where they have a home that they're not leaving for years at a time. They're coming back. So now they can have a house, family, contacts, hobbies, things to do that can not necessarily flesh out your world building, but can flesh out the player's character building, which a lot of people actually find that, very fulfilling. They don't need to be the one who's always going and slaying the dragon. They really enjoy those more comfortable, cozy cottage moments, In addition, kind of growing on that is narratively, it really helps with characters that have built-in organizations to which they are attached. So I know I sent it for a mailbag episode. I will admit I have not listened, so I'm sorry if this was already answered, but I find it interesting how many characters of these murder hobos, their class, their background, their race, even their species, pardon me, have a built-in organization to which they're attached. They are a cleric or a paladin of this church. They are a rogue in a thieves guild. They're a merchant. They're an artisan. Hell, even wizards have schools, right? And yet, when we're playing these games, the players just fuck off for months or years at a time with no touchback to what is apparently supposed to be a very character defining organization to which they're attached. So now you have a place. You have a spot to put that temple. You have a place to put that thieves guild, that wizard school, whatever, that you can then grow with the players.
I just want to pipe up for a second,
yeah, please.
The idea of having these guilds that you're beholden to and whatnot feels like it is, in my opinion, made for West Marches. The back and forth, which is the point that you're making. But I don't see how you are able to play in Theros or Strixhaven or Ravnica, because each one of them has such a rigid structure, whether it is, your college or your god / temple or your actual guild. It's so rigid and it's built right into the system that this is a major factor of your personality. So if you fuck off into the wilderness for a decent amount of time, I don't know how you can reconcile that easily without just hand waving and saying, "Oh no, you come back and everyone's happy to see you." The end, right? I guess you're a lieutenant now. It never sat right with me.
Exactly. I mean, and honestly, I haven't done the spreadsheet math to figure it out, but I would say the majority of classes lend themselves to a group of people that would be fucking mad that you disappeared for a long time without their permission. You're a fighter with a soldier background, or you are still in the army. The army has views on people when they leave. You're a barbarian who's part of a tribe. You're important to that tribe. You're a monk as a monastic order. I mean, outside of a ranger whose whole goal is to live on the fringes of society and protect society from things or protect nature from things. I mean, even druids have circles. You have a burden of responsibility, an onus to be with this group that we just fiat ignore, right? We just say, hey, don't worry about that. Don't worry about my wizard school. Don't worry about my, temple that I am the defender of as the paladin, or I'm the, second lead cleric, the person who's, leading sermons. Don't worry about that. I'm just going to disappear for a year. So it makes more sense to have this, this nucleus that they can go to, come and go from. And also it it leads into the next of, it allows for a pool of characters. A safe haven allows for, a large group of potential characters for your players to swap between, because maybe their character is doing that. Hey, no, it's my kid's graduation. I can't go on that. I can't go on that particular adventure. I can't go and do that thing because it's a really important solstice time for my circle. So it allows for a pool of characters to be swapped between. And also, you don't have to then find a new character on the road or wherever you are. Another stop on the Tangent Express. I was playing in a game of Imagine, which is a high fantasy role playing game similar to D&D that kind of died out in the late 90s, early 2000s. And we had a guy who really wanted to play, and so his character was introduced mid dungeon, and so we murdered him immediately because we didn't trust him, right? And I can see that being very much the case in so many games. Oh, you're on the roads in Barovia, and somebody shows up, a backup character, because Steve's character died in the last session because he was an idiot, or somebody new wants to play and they're trying to introduce their character. Well, narratively, it's really difficult to introduce that level of trust and acceptance of, yes, come, please join our adventuring party and go with us as we save the day. So having a known community, hey, these are the characters that are there. They are heroes. They are adventurers. We know who we can go to for different things, kind of bridges that gap a little bit.
It's so funny because that's exactly what happened to Terry. His character, his beloved character, died in a campaign a few years back, previous campaign, and he showed up 2 weeks later with a new character and was immediately distrusted and hated by the rest of the party, even though Terry's like, guys, this is my new character. And they nearly murdered him. Like, it was
Solomon Duke that had died.
Yeah.
I remember Solomon Duke. Yeah. But I mean, yeah. And it's you'll want the players to get into the characters' heads and play their character as the character and not metagame. But there's that kind of agreement, there's that social contract of, I don't want you to metagame, so I'm going to go out of my way and make it so you don't have to metagame. Like, I'm going to make it kind of make sense in the story as best I can. But run a Curse of Strahd campaign and try and figure out where to introduce backup characters. It's a pain in the ass. I find
that one and Tomb of Annihilation can be a little difficult. Like, you've got to head back to one of the villages to meet people. Otherwise, they're just like traipsing around and where they really fucking shouldn't. Right.
I mean, even in like Storm King's Thunder, if your character dies on the road and then you roll into Bryn Shandar or Tribors or wherever, and you're like, well, we go to a tavern and we look for another adventurer. Hey, who here wants to go with us to fight the giants and save the Ordning? No, fucking, there are giants out there. They're trying to tear the walls down. Fucking no, man. I'm not doing that. It's a very catch-22. If you're in that universe and somebody throws up their hand and says, me, take me on this, most likely ending in death adventure, your brain should be screaming, not that guy, not that person. I don't want that person. But so narratively speaking, it does, provide you that opportunity for a little more sensical management of characters. Additionally, along with better understanding of what characters are available and creating that pool is also a better understanding and defined resource pool in town. Your characters going from the town out to adventure and come back know what's available. Hey, we know there is a temple to resurrect Steve after he gets cut in half again. We know there's a person selling magic items. Or selling potions or whatever. And, I just thought of this as a DM, because you're limiting it to that town and that predefined resource pool. You're also cutting down on the number of NPCs you have to create or voice. So yes. You can have your 5 voices you fall back on over and over again instead of a new one every time.
Yeah.
And you can also, your characters can get involved with that town to better develop resources. hey, we really want a fight club. We really want a animal pen to store the dinosaurs we caught. We really want a blank. And then you can work with them to find a way to create that resource in town to be a reliable resource to come back to over and over again. Again, very much like a role-playing game. I don't know if they do this in like Final Fantasy, but in Disgaea, you unlock certain shops, weapon shop, armor shop, potion shop, whatever, and then they stay in your town. And so it's there all the time. And so you're not worried about, hey, we're going to roll into the next town with 40,000 fucking gold, breaking the back of our mule because we threw it all on there and we didn't feel like arguing about how much gold weighs. And we got to spend it. Yeah, man, there's no place to spend it. There's a tavern on the side of the road. Sorry. No, you're going back to town. You know exactly what you're doing. And all of that kind of leads into something for me, which is a big pro, is kind of a consistent format to, a consistent structure to the call it missions, call it adventures, but from the time you leave town, go and do something and come back, and then you're back in town. You can create a very structured episodic form to your game that can really appeal to some players. And, when I was thinking about this, I was really thinking about, I was thinking about a lot of the actual plays I listen to. They go and do the mission, they come back, and then they've got structured downtime where they do character management. That's when they do their level up. That's when they do their shopping. That's when they do their blank. And that kind of structure can really appeal to players because, they know, people don't like to be surprised. Nobody likes to be surprised. And so being able to have a defined, and now this is going to be a downtime episode. And I know I get to go and check on my dog and check on the forge I run and do some shopping and I think would be really attractive to some players and to me as a DM, because I know, okay, I don't really need to plan the next adventure right there. I'm going to drop some adventure hooks at the end of that session, but that session's just going to be, delving a little bit more into midweek content, if you will, and a little more into downtime, really exploring downtime.
Look, I don't have much to add. I think you're hitting the nail on the head on these.
Well, I'm hoping to open it up a little bit here. So one thing I was thinking about with that episodic nature is when you have a structure like that, where you have a defined beginning and an end, it allows you to do something that's, I'm not going to say blasphemy, but it's probably not quite correct. It allows you to get away from necessarily D&D stuff and start incorporating other game mechanics if you want to. I was looking at Blades in the Dark, a really interesting game that is very, mission focused. You can do a thing per mission. And so with my game I'm developing, I'm going to try and develop a, we've got the daily skills and between short rests, between long rests, etc. I want to do like, here are resources you can burn per mission. From the time you leave the safe haven to the time you return, that's your mission. Here are resources you get 3 for that time frame to then use. And that kind of creating a format, creating a structure lets you then you create the skeleton and then you play with the meat that goes on it. And you can kind of really mess with and rejigger and reshape the rules again to what the players want, because this game is about, as much as it is about my precious story, it's fucking not. It's about the players, right? It's about them having fun. It's about all of us having fun. And, all of us DMs, at the end of the day, our precious story can go out the window. If our players are having fun, we are having a ball and we are finding fulfillment in that.
Yes.
So those are some pros. Can you think of any pros that maybe aren't on that list or maybe were that you came up with while I was pontificating?
I don't think that we've given enough weight to the idea of having the pool of characters. We've talked about it a bunch on this episode already.
Yeah.
But we've talked about it from a DM perspective. Players love to theory craft and build. I've got a couple of players like Mieka who don't want to build the mechanics. She will lay on the couch and stare at the ceiling and say, I want to be a pirate princess that lives in a palace that is shaped like a giant white boat, and the sail is a massive tower. And I would be able to teleport up there because it has to be private and only I can control it. And this is the character that I want to build. But then it comes to like, all right, so we're starting at level.
So what
8.
are her stats? Fuck. 20, all 20. Okay.
Yeah.
What's her name? I don't know. Yeah.
No, it's funny. She'll do the name. She'll even have fun picking a subclass. But the moment that the math comes out, she's done. And then I've got other people like Dan or Dave or Casey who see, oh, I get to build a new character. Challenge accepted. Let's go.
Right.
Right. And so, having these different opportunities for players to think about characters differently. You're no longer worried about your level progression. And a lot of the times you're not starting off at level 1 or 3. You come in at level 7 because that's what this session, like, I want to use this creature. It's a CR 12. Everyone make level 11 characters, right? And understand this will be difficult. And then they do, and they craft a level 11 character, which is a lot different than evolving a level 11 character, right?
Oh yeah. And that's the difficulty of like the adventure leagues is you play in those, and you know, if you want to come in with a level 5 character, they'll look at you and say, the fuck are you doing? You start at level 1 and we will tell you when you get your experience and we will give you magic items. You're like, oh, okay. All right. Well, shit.
Yeah. Or this isn't setting specific enough. Like I like what you've done here, but you wanted to be a Goliath and you can't because there are no Goliaths. So your options, if you want to be that big and that gray, would be an orc. And we're like,
right.
Well, I didn't want to be an orc, right?
I don't want to be an orc. I'm sorry, you're playing in Squat Holman. We are all dwarves.
And I mean, there may be some West Marches that are all dwarves. Like it's the dwarven community and all the players are on board with that. Like, yeah, we'll play different flavors of dwarves with different classes that stack differently while being a different clan. And that's cool. But it doesn't have to be that way. When you're playing West Marches, you show up with whatever fucking auto gnome that you want to be, right? Because you don't need to justify it. You just need to show up and play. And it allows more expansive fun for the theory crafters that are at the table. And so that's the big pro for the players, is not that they don't, because a lot of players these days are all about my character. I've got character art. I can cosplay as them. I went out and I just ordered their signature weapon made out of foam.
Yeah. There's a lot of people who D&D is a very short stepping stone, or is it's the methadone for their LARP heroine.
Exactly. And then there are other characters like Dave, who, I'm not kidding, in the last 5 years, Dave has not made a decision for character creation. He grabs the Xanathar's guide and rolls randomly. He rolls a D12 to figure out what class he's going to be. He rolls a D10 to figure out which playable race he's going to be, or he will just set down a handful of books and roll a D4 to say, okay, which one of the books am I looking in for my subclass, right? And then he'll roll a D20 because there were 20 subclasses. It's not even by class. It's just like, what subclass am I going to be? And that dictates it. He comes up with the most fun characters. He's a fairy scout right now. Dave, who is a Warforged barbarian, when he chooses, is being a fairy scout, and he's having a fucking blast. I saw him do this where he was a female Triton barbarian, and she was so much fun, and he was having so much fun playing her. And like, it allows your players to go outside the box and not have to commit, right? So and it's funny because I do have players like Dan who says, hey, I know that when we're done this campaign, we're going to be doing the ultimate campaign afterwards, where all of the previous campaigns have come to a head in this big, like, 15-year plan that we have. And he said, I really wanted to bring out Oscar the Orc for this campaign, but I'm saving him for the next one. These guys, players have designs. They have plans. Right?
Absolutely, yes. And you're we try to find ways for players to indulge that in a lot of campaigns where, like, oh, you want to explore this element or that element, or you want to get a little bit of spell casting, so you'll get this feat, or you want to get a little bit of this. But it, both narratively and mechanically, it can be so hard to then make that work, because that initial choice maybe wasn't the best one to then run down. Like, oh, I really want to, I would love to be a ranged spellcaster. I really love doing range. Really love doing spell casting. And I saw that. And it's like, that's great. You chose dex-based paladin with a polearm. I don't fucking know what I can do with range spell casting as a dex-based paladin with a polearm. Like, I barely know what to do as a dex-based, like, as a dex-based paladin, you're already fucked. Like, I'm working here, but and so yeah, the ability to roll between characters It should be incredibly appealing to the players, like you said, who do the theory crafting or who really just want to dip their toes into a character here and there, and then, like you said with Dan, swap back to the character for the big campaign.
Yeah.
And that pool of characters, and also it really lets you as a DM open up what you want to do with the little mini adventures, because I've had plenty of times where I thought of something and I said, this would be great. There's not a fucking rogue in my party. They're never getting past this locked door. Never. Or I've got a group of very squishy spellcasters. They're all going to die in the third room. So I can't do this little dungeon. I've got to, no matter what I do, no matter how I brain my way around it, they're not going to get through this. But when you have that pool of characters to fall back on, there's enough pieces to form the teeth of the key to get through this. Good. I can work from there.
And it allows them to not have to commit to it as well. One of the things that I do in all of my campaigns is right around level 8. My players are coming up on it right now. Right around level 8, I give them a pool of destiny. This is when they get there. And if they soak for an entire long rest in the pool of destiny, then they can keep all of their memories, all of the backstory, but change who they are, and that allows them to do a complete rebuild of the mechanics of their character. Right? And I'm telling you, they jump on it every time because they have made decisions while leveling that they wouldn't make now that they are further along. Right? West Marches allows them to just discard what they don't want and try something new.
I've played I've run a few, and I've seen several games where at level 3 going into level 4, so you get to play through level 3, but at level 4, at level 3 you are completely malleable. As long as the changes you are making are not going to somehow retroactively cause extreme problems or are in response to another character, you can change your race, class, sex, subclass, everything. Don't care. And I've seen a few people take that opportunity as well, just to completely rejigger their character. Hell, when I'm playing video games where you got to lock in what you're doing, you better believe there's a save file right before that so that I can just keep, swapping out and trying stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So are there any other pros, or would you like to move on to the cons?
Let's get into the cons for a while.
Let's get into the cons. So for me as a DM, this number one is going to probably be one of the bigger cons, and that is you have to have a very well-developed map of the environment with your adventures kind of figured out. Your players, you can reskin, you can have the same dungeon no matter what they choose. I've got 5 dungeons to choose from. Okay, we choose this one. Okay, they're all the same fucking dungeon. But if you're getting into the scenario you were talking about where you have multiple DMs, or if you have characters who want to jump around in the same area, you got to have a really well-developed map. And that can put a lot of burden early on into developing the campaign, or not campaign, the game.
I'm gonna actually argue with you on this one because
Okay.
I see this conceit quite a bit online where people feel like they have to have the whole world developed if you're going to do West Marches, and I don't think that's true. What you have to do is zoom out and know what your continent looks like and where your forest region is, your mountain region, right? And then what you need to do is simply say, hey, look, we know, because you have to remember the average person in medieval times never went with outside of a 10-mile radius from their house, right?
Okay.
They didn't know what was going on. You ever seen the old artwork of what they thought an elephant looked like? Not a single fucking person got it right because they'd never seen one before.
No,
So,
I've got a medieval bestiary that's hilarious, and I want to say there was an episode of Catherine the Great, or the Great. It was just called the Great. But where somebody brought a crocodile to the Russian court. And so everybody's saying, there's a fucking dragon loose in the palace killing people, because nobody knew what a goddamn crocodile was.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is where, this is my challenge on this, is if I can be perfectly honest, you don't know what's 10 miles beyond. If there is goblins are in those hills 12 miles away, you just need to know where the paths, the directions, the roads, and the rumors are. Right. And then you can send them out. And once it's done and people are doing their session reports, then you fill in the map.
And see, you are right. The challenge I think a lot of people have, and I have this, is having played so many games, having seen the maps developed in the books, having played enough video games where there are these just gigantic developed maps. there is that fear of, okay, here is what the rumors you've heard. You've got goblin sightings in the Northeast, you've got werewolf sightings in the West, you've got orc sightings in the South, and then there's some weird glow coming from the Northwest or whatever. And the players say, cool, we're not going in any of those directions. We are going, like, what is over here where nothing is? Nobody knows. Okay, we're marching in that direction, and we're just going to keep fucking going. And in your brain, you're like, oh God, I need to have something out there. And so it's a very self-perpetuated, you put the weight on yourself of, I need to have this figured out.
But again, I don't think so, because if they're going into a place that is entirely random, then myself as a dungeon master is going to say, all right, what level are they? All right, I'm going to just find whatever CR 2 levels above that, right, is going to be there, and it's super deadly, and that's why there's never any rumors coming out of this area. They're going to bite off more than they can chew, right? And if they win, that's going to feel great. And if they lose and they've got to run away, they're going to say, oh shit, maybe we should stick to the fucking adventures that were planned at.
Right. And I mean, as a DM, you obviously, what you do is you have 5 and you tell them about 4.
Yeah.
And then when they decide not to do any of those 4 because they're players and they're saying, ha ha, we broke your game, fuck you, DM. Not saying all players do that, but at some point in their, game life, they do. Your 5th one is that orbiting electron that is just zipping around the nucleus of the town. And, oh, you didn't go into this 4? You ran into this one. You got the wandering monster. It got you. And then, yeah, you kind of drive them back. I guess, I would say another con on that is, as a person that runs linear A to B plots with little subplots and side quests off of it, it can be kind of, you feel almost like you've wasted your effort when you say, I've built 4 one-shots, and they went and they did number 5, and then they never revisited any of those 4. All right, you can kind of force it by saying, okay, you're still level 1 or you're level 2, and these are still kind of in your realm. But you feel like at some point they're going to go past those, and then you're like, well, that's a lot of effort that I'm just going to put away for a future game that may never happen. But again, back to the very beginning caveat, some of these pros and cons can be seen from either side, which makes this a wonderfully divisive topic.
Yeah, and I agree. A lot of the cons that I'm seeing you list here, I'm like, I think about Joss Whedon, who's problematic and he's been canceled and all that shit. But at the time, he was hailed as one of the better television writers. This is pre-Avengers and whatnot. And he went on record as saying, I love it when they give me a budget that is smaller than what I wanted, because it means I've got to get creative. I have to find the solution to work around this problem. And so when I see a lot of you need to have the big map. Like, no, you don't. There's a creative solution, and that is random tables and, semi-random tables, right? And like every time that, I can see your next note here is it's going to be harder to keep the players engaged without the higher stakes and overarching plot. But their engagement is they're playing something new. That's the level of engagement. And if they don't want to do that, then you don't run a West Marches campaign, right?
Right. Yeah. Yes. And that's, again, it comes down to how your players do things. And you're right. The map is, it's again, the random tables are great. And one thing I would say to anybody who's about to run a West Marches game is, if you have the opportunity to play the game, The Quiet Year. The Quiet Year is a very interesting game that is very narrative about settlement building, where you are working your way essentially through a deck of cards. The McElroy brothers used it for building their Ether Sea world, whether you like that season or not. A lot of people hated it in the end, but the building of the world was really good. McElroy brothers, The Adventure Zone, Ether Sea, but that game shows you how because the whole game is about making a map. The whole game is about, you build a settlement and you build the map around it as random things occur. As you go through the cards and they tell you, okay, come up with a bad thing that happens to all the young people. Come up with a bad thing that happens to all the old people. Develop a whatever. Find these resources. Oh no, cougars attacked. What have you. You find that, yes, the blank spots of the map are where you have the most fun. Absolutely the most fun are the blank spots, especially when it's the players helping you figure out what's in those blank spots. So, like you're saying, use your random tables, have your players develop the map, have a blank map with a center point that is the starting point, and then around it in rough directions, just write the name of whatever the little mini adventure is, going out in sort of concentric rings, based on level, kind of give yourself level ranges, zones, if you will, and then use those random tables, use those actions by the players and those funny one-offs and those jokes about, oh, we found an ogre who's stuck in a well. Like, okay, that's going on the map, ogre well right there. And you're going to have a ton of fun. And I mean, that's kind of a lot of these cons when I'm looking at them are really just the mindset of the DM. Like you were saying, it's harder to keep the players or you touched on the next point I had, which is could be harder to keep players engaged without higher stakes and overarching plot. That is actually probably more of a DM problem because a lot of DMs have this, I know I do. I have a big, grandiose, save the universe, save the world plot. And I want my players to go down that and I want them to help me develop this story. And I want a story that begins and ends and has some sort of significant culmination and the good guys win. And you're not necessarily going to get that with the West Marches because there isn't. And so.
But I mean, just to prove the point here, your first pro is that it's easy on the DMs because they don't need to have an overarching plot, right? If you have one, then you're maybe not. You should be doing West Marches, right? Like this isn't the format for that, right? And so, and it's worth pointing out that you should never look if you're going to be hard and fast on a campaign setting and following those rules specifically. You should not play Dragonlance if your number one complaint is that you can't have the GIF in it because you really want colonial hippos from space. Yeah. Like that doesn't fit, right? So there are strengths and weaknesses, and I wouldn't say that these are cons, but they're definitely the weak points. Like you're right, your overarching plot is going to be difficult. I've got some ideas about it, but it is going to be more difficult because it's not a standard D&D campaign, right?
Right.
So not having it is something that you just have to understand by your session 0 when you start prepping that I am not going to have I will have a framing device. I will not have a big bad evil guy. The big bad evil guy is going to be the nature of the world, right?
Yeah, and I guess as a DM, and I realize this is forever DM, and you probably commiserate with this a little bit, is if you don't have an overarching plot, you don't have an end. And it's like, how do we end this? And the answer is, well, you don't necessarily need to. You just switch over to a new group of characters and start off again at the low levels and go explore that other temple.
And if I can be perfectly honest, that's why my favorite West Marches examples, see, Perils and Princesses, there's a leveling system, but we've already agreed we're going to play at level 2, and we're going to stay at level 2. There are only 4 levels. We're going to stay at level 2 as we learn this system and explore the world and figure out our flow and whatnot, and then we can discuss moving on later. But for the rest of 2025, we are level 2. Hard stop. We're not leveling. And that's why I like West Marches, because you'd be like, hey, I've got a level 5 dungeon over here, or I've got a level 7 dungeon. And you tell them, you should bring a character at this level in order to make it. Do not go higher than this, right? And then they show up and they play that, and the characters don't level until you want them to. But again, I wouldn't even have them level. I would just say, hey, I know we just finished level 6 dungeons. The next 3 adventures that I have planned are all level 11. So write new characters. There's no end, right? And the one after that, they're level 3. So like there is no end. And I'm actually going to jump ahead a little bit because you have additional thoughts later. And the number one is how to incorporate overarching plot. I'll tell you, the way that you incorporate the overarching plot is when your players have run out of steam and everyone has canceled and moved on with their lives. You only have 4 players left. And then you determine that all of this evil had one grand designer, and you go kill them and end the campaign.
Right.
So you wait until it becomes a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, just naturally, because it always will. I've never had a campaign that doesn't have players drop, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I will jump in and follow up on that. I was thinking about that a few minutes before we started recording, and do you need to incorporate an overarching plot? No, you don't. In fact, the West Marches style is antithetical to that and is designed not for it. But, we like to have our big, grandiose stories. Most DMs, they want to be storytellers. We are storytellers, and we want to have a story that has beginning, end, and meaning. And I would say to incorporate an overarching plot is exactly what you said, and that is to, when people get tired of the West Marches, make a tier. Hey, Tier 2 is going to be a West Marches tier. And after you guys have finished exploring everything that would be a Tier 2 area, that's when the big plot's going to drop. And that's when you're going to have your characters move on to the arc. You pick a tier to sandwich it in as the place, and then, start somewhere else, move into it, and then move on from it. So to continue on with the cons, rotation of characters can make it difficult to predict or plan accordingly for balance. I think it can be hard as a DM if you're used to, okay, I know I've got paladin, a rogue, a fighter, a wizard, and a cleric, and you're used to them, and you kind of plan out around that, and then suddenly someone swaps out their character, or makes the very realistic petition of, well, my level 6 character goes and asks my level 11 character, who I know is doing nothing, for help. That can make it kind of difficult to plan for the balance of the encounters, but I guess it's truly not that difficult as long as you leave a ripcord for the characters to realize that they are in an unbalanced situation and escape from it.
Yeah.
I've never really heard characters complain too often about it being unbalanced in their favor.
Well, that's because all players are cheaters.
I've actually been saying that. So I've got that as a note. So later we're going to talk about advice, and I'll go ahead and jump to that right now about players cheating. Something I see this system lending itself to for, quote unquote cheating would be players who have a main character and then use their other characters to grind or get equipment for or get treasure for that character. We're going on a level, I've got a level 6 character, but we're going on a level 3 quest. Cool. After I get that treasure, they just give it to my level 6 character. Please fucking don't do that.
I honestly, yes, you're completely correct. That is something that would happen. I am 100% just going to say, hey, look, this is a world of special, of low magic, of special artifacts being coveted intensely, and if you want to trade items between characters, you can go right ahead, but you are going to have to trade. It is going to have to be worthwhile.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
Because again, I'm not opposed to that, because if you need the ancestral dragon slaying sword to go do this thing, and it's on character A, but everything else, like the player really wants to play character B, fuck, go ahead, play character B. Take the sword.
Oh, no, I absolutely. I'm thinking about the people that abuse it.
Well, that's just session 0 and meta conversations with the assholes
exactly.
at the party. Like, I hear what you're saying. I am, I think, fortunate enough in my own experience now to not have a table of people that would abuse, mechanics. They're here for the story and the fun, and so I don't really think about that. Like, I don't worry about it to the same degree as I think other people do, and I think that's actually just me being fucking privileged to have these great players.
Well, I mean, a lot of this game does require the right characters, the right players.
Yes. I don't think that we've got much more here on the cons list.
No, I've got one left, unless any. So I'll do this one, and then I'll ask if any of these have, or if you've have any that have been sparked. But this one is interesting to me because, again, it gets outside of the game itself. The West Marches really relies on notes and a level of communication between your players for session reports and map building. So, the kind of the conceit was that your people who are not in the game would receive these reports, the information, the pass down, the gouge, if you will, the turnover, whatever you want to call it, of what had happened. And so that relies on somebody in your group being a good note taker and good communicator, and then somebody else actively kind of like building out the map. And I just can see that being a difficult spot depending on the table. There are some people who are great at communicating in game. There's some people who are great at communicating out of game. And then there are a lot of people who are not good about communicating in-game world stuff outside of the actual game.
I understand that is yes, that is a factor. There are people like Brad who keeps an updated wiki after every session for everyone in his campaign. And then there are people like Megan, who I think in the last year and a half has taken 4 pages of notes. Most of them are randomly on the page somewhere. It is a scatter shot of her frightening inner monologue. And
how many of those are lewd drawings?
Not as many as you would think. Mostly that just comes out in the moment out loud. By the time that it would come to put pen to paper, she's already moved on to the next lewd thought.
Now, does Brad keep the wiki as a player or as a DM?
Player.
Okay. Yeah. No, well, I mean, in my game, we've got the game I'm playing in, we've got a shared Google Excel sheets, whatever the hell it's called, that we go back and fill out. But I did notice that for probably the first 25 sessions. The same person was filling it out. And then there was some lack of communication on the treasure column. Somebody was filling out the treasure column and also like decrementing for the players when they spent money. And then somebody else went in and updated that, but didn't know that decrementing had been happening. And so the accurate accounting for treasure and gear, and in one player's case, the number of skulls that had been collected got all out of whack. So
but again, this is something where if it's about the note taking and it's about communication, you just have to have people know that when they sign up for your West Marches session, they have to fill one of the 4 fucking roles as a person. They have to be the scheduler. They have to be the person. One person's a scheduler, one person's in charge of snacks, one person is in charge of note taking and publishing the session reports, and one person is in charge of oh shit, I don't know, music. Take some shit off the DM's shoulders, right?
Right.
Like just give everybody the opportunity to sign up for what they want to do. So if they want to play it, but it means they've got to be the note taker, and they're not going to do it, they will not join, and that's fucking fine, right?
Right.
There'll be a spot for someone else. There are 10 to 14 people here. Someone else will want to do it. And if nobody wants to do it, I'm going to be honest, it's a lot easier for the DM than it is for a player, because we already have the notes half written.
Well, and also as a DM, you can have a lot of fun, because one of the things earlier said was the notes aren't necessarily absolutely true. They can be unreliable.
Yes.
And as the DM, if you are basing your notes off of things you hear your players say in character, oh, you can have a lot of fucking fun with unreliable notes. Now, that also could lead to wasting a lot of people's time as a joke, which we want to not do, because, free time and leisure time is precious. But yeah, so a lot of these, these are the cons I see as somebody coming at it from my perspective as a DM, because I think, okay, I've really got to have a complete map developed. And I know that's not true, but that's just my perspective. And then I'm worried, players aren't going to be interested if there's not some save the universe plot. But, that's me as the DM. I'm not going to be as necessarily interested in running a Monster of the Week campaign, because I've never done it. So it might be good. I'm unfamiliar. And then I know my players, and I also know that when I look at the people that would play it in my game, the note taking, the scheduling, the developing of the map, and all of that in between time would fall on one person who would do it. And that one person would get, I'm not going to say bitter, but almost bitter about being the secretary of the group, if you will.
And this is just where you have to have a session 0 before this, or a fucking sign-up sheet that has rules at the top, right? Like, if you've got, for example, you're going to do West Marches, we did our session 0 for the Perils and Princesses, and the big thing that I hit over and over was, hey, we're going to run this number of sessions, and I only want 4 players per session. If we don't get enough, that's fine. I'll run it with as many as 2. But like, I don't want more than 4. It's a new system. We got to play online, which I'm not comfortable with. So I would like everyone to get a spotlight. We're not playing very long sessions, so 4 players. But the number of sessions times the number of players does not divide equally into 7. There's 7 of you. What that means is you have to respect other people. As we get later and later into this, if you played in the first 5 sessions, it is time for you to step back for a few, right? So I don't want anyone to be beholden to think they have to show up. That's the point of our West Marches style, right? But at the same time, if you're showing up for every single one of them, please understand that other people need the opportunity to chime in and say whether or not they want to play as well, because we have people in different time zones, right? That are going to have, they're going to find out that, oh, hey, we're going to play 2 Sundays from now. But they're not going to find out until 17 hours after everybody else does, right? Like, that just happens. So
and then they're going to be the last person to sign up because everybody else,
right. And so this was our social contract that we had to have ahead of time. And if session reports were a part of that, then everyone would know you are going to have a turn. If we're going to play 12 sessions and there are 14 of you, just expect every single one of you is going to have a turn. And when it's your turn, you have to do it. And if you don't do it, that puts you on the bottom of the list for the next time you want to play.
So I don't know exactly how to do this, but the first thing in my mind with that would be, there will be people who look at the list of adventures provided and they will like, oh, here's the 5 things that are happening near the town. And they'll be absolutely engrossed by all 5, or they'll only be interested in 2. And I mean, that's kind of the idea of the West Marches is the players drive the game by what they're interested in. It almost feels like you would need to develop I don't know how to say a bidding system, but if you had 7 players who all could and all wanted to, but you only had room for 4, you'd be like, hey, I need you to give me a prioritized list, a weighted list, and then or a bidding system. You all get X number of points. You put this many points toward that one, that many points toward that one. And that way you could assign the players to the games they really want to play, and they would know ahead of time, hey, you've already spent all of your points, so you're not going to be able to be in these ones. Or you put these ones at the bottom of your priority, so they're not there for you. And I guess, yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I did, right? I said, everybody pick. I put up, so I built my map ahead of time, just the continent that we were on. And I just like, all right, mountain range here, river here, forest here, Arctic there. A little bit of desert, a little bit of grassland. I think I've covered it all. Oh, wait, volcano over there, and Smilands. Gotcha. So I've got it. Now I'm just going to throw a bunch of random fucking labels down. I used Incarnate to do it. So it was easy to just grab like houses or cities or towers, like icons, and drop them in random places on the map. And just sit back and go, what would be a neat name for this? And I had fun myself naming it for like a half hour, naming all the different things.
Right.
And then I said, here's all the shit. But there were no plans. There was no monster. There was no conflict. There was nothing. These are just locations where something evil lives. And I said, I want everyone to pick 5. Well, that should be 35 different things, right? And I've written like 50, but a bunch of them doubled up on stuff, right? So there's just a large swath of this map that are unexplored. So the idea is that in these unexplored areas, like where nobody gives a shit about going to this place, I'm like, well, what are we going to put in there? I need to have backups, but instead of writing plots or coming up with, hooks to get people into it, the only thing I did was I also asked, what are you hoping to get out of this game? What vibes do you look for out of fairy tales? What's your favorite fairy tale? Who's your favorite princess from pop culture? And you can do that with D&D. Like, why do you play D&D? What's your favorite hero archetype? If you had to fit the role of muscle-bound warrior or a sneak that sticks to the shadows or a magic nerd, which one would you want to do? Who's your favorite superhero, right? And when they come up with these different things, you say, okay, I think I understand why. And if I need to fill in gaps, or then hey, all 7 of the players signed up for the same thing and they all want to play. Say, look, you don't know where you're going on the map yet. You know, kind of this rumor you want to deal with. So the very simple answer is, Goblin encampment is to the north. Everyone wants to go to the Goblin encampment. Okay, you 4 are going to do this. You 3 have also heard a rumor that there are goblins moving to the northwest. And I'll just run 2 sessions, right? And we're going to get the same vibes because I know what they want, right?
I mean, yes. God, being able to run 2 sessions with, it's split between people is a luxury and a curse.
I split my party. I did a couple episodes on splitting the party on the Patreon in the homebrew series. And I split the party by necessity because of scheduling issues, which is kind of the West Marches is the same thing. Like, it's just 2 different schedules. And my players just understood that every other session they would be at for the next couple of months. If you say, hey, I'm going to run 2 sessions in June, right? And they all want to play the same goblin thing. Well, then, okay, you guys are session 1 goblins. You guys are session 2 goblins. You have signed up for this session in June, right? Like, that's the deal. They have to understand and respect you as a dungeon master and your time and your limitations. And doing the podcast has taught me that shit, because I cannot tell you, I've now juggled 17 hosts over 6 years, and everyone has a different schedule. I know that Terry doesn't like to do Tuesdays. He doesn't like to do weekends. Dave will never do a weekend, except maybe a Friday night, but don't ask him to do it twice in the same month. I know that Brad can only give me 1 recording day every month, but if I go light on a previous month, I can get him in 2 in a row, like 2 weeks in a row later. And so I've had all of this finagling and figuring it out and whatnot. And I finally said to them, and every month I'm in there with a brand new updated schedule because people's lives got in the way or whatever, right? We're all adults, but I finally said enough is enough. I cannot bounce. I know more about your personal lives than you realize because I know what you're up to and your personal schedules. I know who's got what classes and what month they end in. I know who is in a budding relationship and doesn't want to give up Friday nights. I know I was one of the first people to know that Elwyn was pregnant because she had to let me know because of the schedule, right? Like I know too much about people, and I said, this is too much stress on me. It's too many details for me to take care of. Here is the schedule. If you cannot make it, you three hosts tell me when you are going to reschedule, but you have a 2-week window to do it. I don't give a shit if it's 5 o'clock on a Tuesday evening instead of at 7:30 on a Wednesday. Doesn't matter to me. The room will be available for you to record in. If you can't make it, you do it online. But like, it's up to you. Figure it out. And West Marches is very much that. I think the cons that you're running up against on these, Robert, is you're still trying to run it like a DM in control of all the pieces.
Entirely self-imposed. Yes.
And it's really like the strength of this system is to give the onus to the players as much as possible, right? And if some of them are going to be butthurt that they didn't get into one session, they're all adults, right? They all understand that this session did not exist 2 months ago, and it will have been played in the distant memory 6 months from now, and they will have other opportunities. And if they wanted to do goblins so much, they can DM a one shot, right? Like I think you're stressing too much about it, if I can be honest, because if a session report doesn't get written, you can go in as a DM afterwards and say, all right, here are the 6 important things you need to know, and this is how the map got updated. It would take me as a DM less than an hour to do that, but it might take a player 2.5 hours to give a narrative type up, to put it together. If they don't have the capacity, someone else will pick it up, right? And that might just be what has to happen. Hey guys, I need a session report. So-and-so is supposed to do it, but they've got a busy week at work because they're doing inventory in the warehouse. Can someone else do it? Chances are good someone will pick it up, right?
So 2 things. One, you said by name 4 people with things related to those 4 people. So now you've got the remaining 13 to do of your 17. So I want to hear the dish out on the rest of them. And so 2, that leads me to the question, can you think of any cons then to this system? I mean, we've gone through the pros and we've largely agreed that there's a lot of really, really good, good aspects, good facets of this, and that a lot of the cons are really just, I would say, the kinetic impetus of a lot of DMs to already have a pre-made, I've got my written campaign, I've got my map already made by somebody else, I've got my overarching plot that makes the characters feel important, and I've got kind of a balance figured out. Like, can you think of any cons to the system of a West Marches style campaign?
Yes. So here are my cons. First, you probably need to come up with a basic framework for your storytelling, just so that everybody starts from the same tavern or the same guild or whatever, the same city, right? And if in one session they burn half the city down, that will impact every other session moving forward. So there has to be a basic social understanding and agreement about, what you're not going to do, but still NPCs will die, right? And potentially beloved ones. And there's nothing that player B can do if it happens at a session they're not at, right? So that's negative number 1. Negative number 2 is as a DM, you're sending players off in 1,000 different directions over 1,000 different sessions, right? Which means there will have to be some sort of intense note keeping on your part, because otherwise you're going to end up with 45 inns in this tiny little village because you can never remember the name of the inn from before, right? This world building will happen organically, but it will happen when other people need it to. And so there won't be that world building that you and I like to do so much, which is, I'm going to come up with this town. Here's the theme of the town. Here are the people. This is the family involved with this. The name of this business is based on this because there used to be a dragon that lived with all of that's out the window. So our internal logic is gone. And it's just, well, we needed a pub. So it's called the Frog and Nightgown. If you had come up with that top of your head, you pull it off a random table, you need a list. You need to have that written down somewhere, because you will not be able to remember or figure it out or use your mind palace to put it back together, right? Like,
Right.
so the note taking is hard. I do believe that there's going to be quite a bit of chaos in and around scheduling. And one of those things is if you don't play at the DM's house and you're not playing online, if you play at one of the players' houses and they are not playing that week, where are you playing?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
If you've got if you have 14 people that are playing, one of them is on disability, one of them is on maternity leave, and another one is trying to pick up extra shifts to save for a really important whatever. But these are the three players you have showing up. Who's bringing the $45 worth of snacks?
Right.
So there's logistical chaos in the background, and not all sessions will be created equal because of that kind of chaos that hits, right?
So back to your the 20 different taverns you have in the note keeping. It sounds like, the idea of building a well-developed map where the adventures can be found. We already talked about that's not actually necessarily true. You have kind of these vague or omnibus adventures. You want the players to find the map. The town
should
safe
be
haven.
yours. Yeah.
That's where you nail it down and say, no, there's two fucking Waffle Houses in this town. There's the good one and the bad one. Which are you going to? Good or bad? And good has these character voices, bad has those. And like, you as the dungeon master or game master own that completely. Yes. I mean, you let the players, like we said earlier, you let the players add to, elaborate, what have you, but also they need to understand, don't go starting 10 different taverns as a joke to make me do a bunch of different voices. You're going to get the same, like all of them are going to be staffed by the brothers of the main place or the sisters of the main place. They're all going to sound exactly the goddamn same. So
the point of a West Marches campaign is to go out into the wilderness and explore, right? The understanding is that the guild or the rumor mill or the tavern or the mayor or whoever it is employing you somehow or as some sort of way to coerce you into doing these things. Hell, it could be blackmail. It doesn't have to be positive, right?
I was going to say you could be on it would be very interesting. You're a prison bus went to this town and you are on a work furlough work release program.
This could be the what is it, Night's Watch in Game of Thrones or the Suicide Squad, right? Like, I think that'd be a lot of fun because then you can go into the wilderness and be as evil as you fucking want.
Yeah, not to encourage, I hate to say modern day slave labor, which we in the United States do, unfortunately. So to make it real dark, but
like there are ways to get your party together, but then you send them out into the wilderness and they're going to go discover, it's goblins. It wasn't goblins, it was veggie pygmies, and we're just going to write in veggie pygmy encampment on the map, and either they burned it to the ground and there are no veggie pygmies, or we now have friends that we can use as a waypoint later on. So it's no longer the adventure to go see the veggie pygmies. This adventure starts, you have been sent to the veggie pygmies because they need help, and now it launches from that space, and you can develop your map from there, right? But you do need to know, where was that, which river was that encampment on, right? And how many days travel away, and that kind of shit. And that's where your note keeping is going to have to come into. It's going to have to be at least fairly decently developed, or conversely, you just tell them, hey, you know what? We are going to tell a bunch of different stories. I saw this in a post and I thought it would be really interesting, but I've never done this. There's a kingdom that lasted for 1,000 years. At the beginning of every session, we are going to roll dice. Everyone's going to roll a die and add the numbers together, like percentile dice. That'll tell us which year we're in, and I will have a handful of random tables of rumors for every decade, right? And so there was a veggie pygmy encampment 75 years ago. Now they're all dead.
Your players' actions, yes.
Right. So that would be another way of doing it. The other part of that is that makes it so that you will never have an overarching plot at all, right?
Right.
And again, sometimes, here's one of the, I would consider it a con, but a lot of people would think it's a pro. You're pretty much tied to the idea of a beer and pretzels D&D group, right?
Right.
My guys, I think, would love the idea for about 4 months, and then they would want story. Megan and Casey and Mieka show up for character development. Dan and Charlie are there for the overarching plot. Dave shows up because I yell at him when he doesn't. So.
Yeah. Well, So that jumps right into the additional thoughts we have, but I wanted to go back to the con. One of the cons is, this is not a style for everybody. And that really just comes down to knowing your player group. But one of the things I think about as a con as we were going through this was, and again, you can take any con or any problem or any difficulty in D&D, and I would be willing to bet 99% of them can be sorted out in session 0, right?
Yeah.
Like session 0 is the problem is you need to get a group of adults to speak to each other as honest, frank, open adults without the worry of harming friendships and making setting boundaries. So often the hardest part about being an adult is setting a reasonable boundary with another adult and then respecting those boundaries. But that's it. I mean, that's 99% of adulthood is setting boundaries and respecting boundaries. And that leads into, one of the facets we mentioned, a million years ago in the beginning of this episode was that one of the facets of West Marches is competition between players is encouraged.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see that as a con because a lot of people mistake the concept of competition with the concept of like
conflict,
antipathy. And yes, conflict, antipathy. Like, hey, they're your competitor. They're not your enemy, right? Like the Celtics and the Lakers are competitors. They're not enemies. Enemies want to put other enemies in the ground. Competitors want to beat them at a game and then beat them again at another game. They want to keep playing the game, and getting, players or adventurers to understand that, if you have enough people, that could potentially be a con, because only one person not understanding that or taking it too far as a joke or whatever can really sour the whole, the whole experience. But again,
I think we have a built-in solution to that in this hobby in the first place, which is if you can communicate this appropriately with your mature players, God willing, they're mature players, and you let them know that the competition is between characters. The players are still working together to rid the land of evil. The characters may be in competition. If you've got 14 players, chances are pretty fucking good you've got 3 rogues. They should be in competition, but the players probably aren't. It's bragging rights, but that's as far as it goes, right?
And so I'm going to use that as a segue into our general advice of do's and don'ts. I would say as a do, if you have that competition, if you've got the pool of players and they're competing, you, the DM, need to define subtly or openly what that competition is. Don't leave it open to the players for interpretation, especially if the players are not meeting on the same night and you have 2 people who are not necessarily talking to each other. You define what, you got 2 barbarians and they're in competition with each other. The competition is how many goblin ears they can collect. It's not kill each other in the town square.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry if I cut you off. Did you have any other cons you wanted to jump on?
No. I think that every single group is going to have unique drawbacks and strengths, and it's going to be impossible for us to list them all off. But I love the idea of giving some general advice to wrap this episode up.
Okay, great. We already touched on how to incorporate an overarching plot if you desire to, and that is when your players get bored, or if you finished a tier and you just don't want to keep leveling up in tiers because you have decided that if you're doing your concentric rings around your safe haven and they're getting more and more dangerous, it would get kind of insane that there is a ring of, level 20 threats out there, all in the same distance from your town. That would be kind of silly. So, if your players are bored, they got the character they've settled on, or you have defined it as a tier, like I'm planning to with my mythology campaign, that's a way to do it. Moving into kind of just general do's and don'ts. I would start off with a do of, and we kind of touched on it earlier, do adventure hooks. We talked about treasure maps, we talked about rumors, but I would set adventure hooks not necessarily for the party. I would set adventure hooks for characters the player has expressed interest in playing. Mieka said she wanted to play a pirate princess in the blah, 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 blah. So I'm going to create an adventure about going and finding that person. Or, another player I've expressed an interest in playing a half-orc barbarian, and right now they're playing a high elf mage. Well, I'm going to try and create a scenario where, man, a half-orc barbarian really go down smooth for this thing, and listening to my players create those adventure possibilities to then get them to switch over that character they want to try out.
You know what might be a really interesting way to attack this is to give all of your players a list of 5 rumors that they've heard that pertains to their character only. And then you have them all roll initiative, and that is the order that we're going to do the sessions in. And then when it gets to session 3 and the freaking tiefling warlock over in the corner, it's their turn in initiative. Then they say, hey, look, they go to their Discord server, their email channel, whatever it is. They say, look, I heard a rumor that this and this and this and this and this. I need help. Who can show up? And then that plot hook, whichever rumor they wanted, is the plot hook. You as a DM know, oh, we're going in this direction. Awesome. I know what that is, right? And I can string them in that direction. And the other players that are interested in exploring that is going to join. If they don't want to play with a certain player, or they're not interested in the fucking Kender that's in the 14-person group, then they can avoid that and just not engage. But if a person can't get 3 or more players together to help, then they say, okay, I heard a rumor that this, and they just pick a different rumor, right? And that would be enough. It's just, you are the 14 most influential people in this small town, right? You all know each other pretty well.
Right.
Help each other with your rumors, right? And that's it. And that might actually be a really fun way of pushing it forward. You don't have to do a guild, right? And I think a lot of people just do a guild for West Marches.
Right.
But I mean, that's kind of my big view is don't be afraid to think outside the box on this shit, right? Like there are opportunities that are hidden in the limitations. One of the things that I would point out is if you're running a session 0 and you get everybody's, hey, I don't want to run across torture or slavery, or I've got a weird thing about toenails. Like, everybody's got their red flags, their limits that they don't want to cross, right? And that feels like, oh shit, I've got 14 of these I need to manage. But remember, no, you don't. You only have to manage 4. If you've got 4 people that show up that are totally cool with torture, it is time to go get some goblin ears one way or the other, right? Like, and you can run that. But if you know that it's going to be time to go deal with the goblins, but nobody on this wants to deal with, dirt and filth and shit clinging to clothes, like they've got weird, like, germophobia about that kind of stuff, then yeah, you can sanitize the goblin encounter and it'll be just fine. And so you can cater to whatever the hard limits are. One of the things we never talked about in session 0s, or we it's mentioned, but it's usually just skimmed over, is ask the players what they want. And then when you get your list of 3 to 5 to 6 whatever players that show up for a session, and you look at, oh, they want this, these 4 of them might have really great synergy, and you're going to end up with a session that you were never expecting, right? Like, there's some real opportunities. So don't shy away from the limitations. There's some really great situations that would never have occurred to you, right?
Yeah, no.
Sorry, I don't know if that was a do or don't, but I guess it was a don't shy away from.
Yes, yeah. I mean, the problem with the do's is you can just rephrase them as a don't, and the don'ts you can rephrase as a do, right?
Yeah.
I guess my only other do, and the don't would be, don't force your characters into a situation they can't lead, but always trying to, like, as a do, I would say early on in any sort of adventure, leave an out for your characters to book it back to town. Because, like you said, if they're not leveled appropriately, if they're the wrong characters for the job, you don't want them in a point of no return before they figure that out.
And the thing about this, which I should point out, is just like in one-shots, you don't have a campaign worth of gear in your backpack or attuned items or whatever that you've been built up. We're all guilty as DMs of going, yeah, I haven't handed out anything really fucking cool in a while. I'm going to give them all something to attune to, right? And then you hand out a bunch of treasure over the next couple of sessions. But they were level 7. Now they're all attuned to 2 things. And, there's power creep with players that play for long campaigns. But in West Marches, there's not power creep. They're not going to get that. So like the high level, the vampires, the mummy lords, the Baylor demons, like they're going to fuck up a West Marches group because they just don't have the accumulated resources that you get over a campaign. They don't have the NPCs. They haven't spent all this extra money on barding for their horse because they ran across a dragon horde that you weren't expecting to be so rich when you rolled your random table. Like you got to be really aware. Err on the side of caution for the CR when you're coming up with any sort of challenge. When it comes to West Marches sessions, you got to treat them almost like one shots. In a lot of respects, they are right, but really err on the side of caution unless you want to kill them and teach them all a lesson.
Well, I was going to say that is a pro, is that you can murder the entire party and they've got other characters to jump in on. I mean, that's great. You know, as a DM, I always like the fact that I can, kill the characters.
And so, you can also get the characters that like the next round of characters to go rescue them again. Like dead is not dead in the West Marches campaign.
No. Go capture them or go collect the bodies and bring them back and resurrect. Absolutely. That you guys have created your own quest. Your mains have died and then you send your backups to get them. Your backups died and you send the other ones to get them. And I'm just going to keep doing this. There are some great opportunities with this. I guess the other big don't that I have is don't rub it in people's faces when one team either severely fucks up or surpasses all expectations. Right? Feel free to celebrate people. Feel free to tease your friends a little bit, but things are a little bit more extreme when it comes to what the outcomes of the variables are. They feel more extreme in West Marches because you wrap up this mini story one way or the other by the end of the session, right? And sometimes, a lot of the time, that was pretty fun. But sometimes it's going to feel kind of shitty. It's going to feel unfulfilled. And other times it's going to feel like this was the best one. And all the other shit leading up to this wasn't as good. And there's going to be expectations and pressure put on people, especially the DM, to like replicate something of a similar excitement level or a piece of loot or something, right? To make it even across all 14 or whatever, however many players you have. Don't give into that. Yeah. Some days are good days, some days are bad days. And you can't control how all players feel all the time, certainly, but it's worth not feeling the pressure, giving yourself a little bit of grace. And if you are in a situation where you have multiple DMs all running stuff on the same map, on the same, world, the same West Marches, don't try to compare yourself to the other DMs.
No.
Don't get that Matt Mercer effect. Don't get in there, and keep an open dialogue with them. Just as your players and the players at the other tables are supposed to keep session reports, you need to keep that session report in that DM session 0. I mean, I don't think that's not really something that comes up because the game, they never really thought about, okay, we're going to have 4 DMs for 4 different groups of people in the same world. But you need to have that DM session 0 where you have that discussion about, hey, we're not giving away this amount of magical items. We're not giving away this many levels. We're not doing blank, 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 or we are doing blank, blank, blank. And that way we don't have one DM who everybody wants to be at their table. Having that level, it's all about communication. It's all about just being adults and talking to other adults as if they are adults. So,
and I guess that's the big thing here is it takes a little bit more teamwork from a meta perspective to put together something like a West Marches campaign. There's a lot of great opportunities. There's a lot of fun to be had here. And I recommend it for everyone. Like I say, I'm having a fucking blast doing this. And it has inspired me. It's kind of revitalized my love for the hobby in general right now at all, because it's so different than what I was doing. And it's different. Like each adventure is different from the previous one. Like it just feels fun. It feels good. And I just hope that people that want to explore this can talk their friends into it, because I know it can be a bit much, right? So to try to talk anyone into, let's do a different system of gameplay.
And I guess that leads me to a question I hadn't thought about. I have a final do/don't, which is real simple. I'll touch on it as if you develop the adventures around the town and the people have, your characters have taken them and they've leveled up, don't worry about scaling those adventures. Level 4 players can come back and do a level 1 adventure. Hell, they might have fun doing that. Sure, they're kind of wasting their time because it's really easy, but in video games, plenty of people have fun going back to a starting area and just, cleaning house. But I guess a question I have for you is, do you think this style of game is for a beginner to the D&D world as a player? Do you think that new people should play this, or is that depends on the person, they need to get the murder hobo moving around out of their system, or what?
This actually I think this is a great opportunity for new players to test out a lot of new things. But be prepared to do a lot of math. You'll be making a bunch of different characters. You'll be going up against different kind of monsters. Like, it's going to be a different experience, very different experience every time. It'll be a harpy one week and a kobold war in the next, right? Like, it's going to be a little bit more sword and sorcery, a little bit more adventures of, or tales of, or choose your own adventure. Right. And if you're cool with that, if you like that, man, fucking go for it as a player. As a DM, run a starter set, then run a couple of one shots so that you can explore different flavors and you can work on your pacing. Then grab one of the anthologies, even if it's, Tales from the Yawning Portal or something like that, so that you can do shorter adventures and learn the different flavors and dropping people in and out. I would not recommend, and then I would say homebrew something yourself a handful of times.
Right.
Homebrew 2 shots and 3 shots a bunch, right? And your players can keep the same characters. They can still level. They just need to know that 6 months have gone by and you guys are now in this town, right? And that's fine. And then I would tackle this West Marches thing, because I do believe there's a little bit more paperwork. I believe there's a little bit more communication. There's going to need to be some maturity, and there will be complaints from players because they are going to be in unique situations or have unique character builds or something, and rules are going to get wrong. It's just going to happen. If you are not a seasoned dungeon master that can handle that adjudication and refereeing, then you shouldn't probably be running West Marches campaigns. But if you've played in a bunch of West Marches campaigns as well, that would be I would say if you've been a player for 3 or 4 years and this is going to be your first kind of DMing, you can probably handle this. I think you probably know well enough.
So I agree with you, and it all falls back on that session 0 discussion, especially with if you're talking about a new player. I think it's a great opportunity for a brand new player because you can get over that my precious first character. You can explore a lot, you can see a lot, and you can potentially rotate through other players as you join groups and don't join others. But I would say that comes down to that initial discussion, that initial session 0, and almost a one-on-one session 0 between the DM and that new player of like, hey, I know what you've heard. Everybody says, how do you play D&D? And it's like, you can do whatever you want. And when people hear the words, you can do whatever you want, what they think is, I'm going to seduce the barmaid and then burn the tavern down. And then I'm going to move on. And I'm just going to be this reckless, psychotic, Dennis Leary caricature of a human being. And it's, well, hold on. No, you can't, you need to have that conversation of no. You can seduce the barmaid and you can burn the tavern down, but this is the only town. And when you come back, there are fucking repercussions. Like you really can't murder hobo in this situation because you're not a hobo, and hell, other characters are going to come after you because you burned down their only bar, or you killed their love interest at the stables because they gave you the side eye or whatever. And so, I mean, it's like what you said earlier. If you have mature and boundary respecting players, it's not a problem. But I would also say sometimes you don't know a player is an immature, non-respectful individual until you're playing, because you don't know who that person wants to be. And then their character comes out and they're a nightmare. But yeah, that's, again, back to session 0 solves all problems. Whether that's a group session 0 or an individual session 0 solves basically all problems.
Yeah, and having mature discussions afterwards. If a player does show up with a character that is really like rubbing everybody else the wrong way, that's when the session's done. You can ask them to please retire this character, and as long as you bring that up in session 0, they should fucking respect that, right? Like,
yeah.
Anyway,
and I mean, I've done that. I've had somebody show up and they were using D&D for an outlet that it didn't work, and I was like, hey man, you're not doing a good job. Like this is problematic. You are a weight on the neck of the team, the group, and your fun is in, you are having fun and you are taking away from the fun of everybody else. And luckily he was an adult and he took that on board, and we switched over to a much more relaxed game. He played a different class and everybody had a blast. He was fantastic as that new class. He had come into the game with, bad preconceived notions. And honestly, that failure, that onus was on me as the DM for not better explaining it. But do you have any other do's or don'ts?
No, I think we've probably walked around the do's and don'ts and the pros and cons quite a bit at this point. I am a big fan of West Marches as an experiment for any given group. Like I say, it's not for everybody. And it may be for some people at some times and not for other people at other times, right? Like there may be the same group may want something a little bit more what's the word I'm looking for? Cohesive, right? They may want to save the world. West Marches doesn't save the world until all of a sudden you've realized that, we've done a bunch of demon stuff over the last, like, it's not every session, but a lot of it. I could do a big demon thing and invite 8 players, right? And do a big fuck off Saturday, right? To do this. And that would feel really good. And like, it is going to teach you to think about D&D very differently and in very good ways. So I guess that's my final thought.
No, I'm in agreement. I think it's a fascinating concept. I think, I wouldn't say seasoned, but not brand new DMs should all give it a try. And I definitely think a West Marches portion narratively fits into any campaign. Early on in a campaign, when your characters are still establishing themselves or getting their bona fides, they need to, have that freedom to explore, have the freedom to fail, a safe place to fail and to fuck up and not, damn the world to destruction or kill the rest of the party is a great place for a player to kind of explore the game. Having like I said earlier, an episodic or a format, West Marches really lends itself to a format, lets you play with the structure of the game, play with how you want to introduce new mechanics or new homebrew rules. And it really narratively lends itself to, what makes the most sense of a hero's journey. And then you don't have to stick with it. You can then shift to an overarching, and now you're level 8 and you are going to go save the world because it makes sense. Or now you can just retire your characters and play new ones or do whatever you want. And it really lends itself to just the fun of being heroes, which is what D&D seems to be about, telling the story of heroes without necessarily anchoring it to, and if you fuck up, the world gets destroyed.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well,
yeah.
Do you have any people, personal social media projects you want to mention? Any shout outs?
Yeah, I want to shout out a fellow Platinum Greatwyrm, Scott. He's a fucking great guy. He's really fun to talk to. He's really engaging. He's really friendly. We chat a lot. We message through the Discord a lot, and he is just a great guy. A few months ago, he ran a one-shot for people where he ran a Pathfinder game. Ton of fun, and I really appreciate him giving us his time to let us play that game. I had a lot of fun as a bomb building, distillery running, multi-level marketing cactus, which made perfect sense in the game itself. And I'd also like to congratulate him on being the It's a Mimic overall trivia winner. I run a basically nightly trivia on the Discord where I'm using trivia questions from a D&D Trivial Pursuit. They are not necessarily easy. If you think that you want to jump in there and answer some questions, I fucking hope you know what street Gary Gygax grew up on, because that's the kind of shit that's in there. But he is the overall winner. He blew everybody else out of the water, and he did it through the most important characteristic of anybody in the D&D community. He did it through consistency. He played probably 95% of the time. I think he played more often often than I, as the trivia question asker, participated. So consistent participation across the board. Scott killed it. He has won the trivia. I'm figuring out a trophy to send him right now. It should be appropriate for the venue, but yeah, I just want to shout out Scott. He's a great guy, great person, love him to death. Yeah, so
it's funny that you mentioned the campaign. I have already recorded his Platinum Greatwyrm episode, the next one that's coming, and it is the one after this one, so it'll be next month sometime. And it is entirely based around that campaign, that experience of running the one shot, and how I was very chaotic, and he kind of chastised me a little bit. I'm not gonna lie. So
really? Yeah. I'm glad I'm not talking to him. I introduced multi-level marketing to his world, so I'm sure he's got some choice words for me as I.
Yeah, we had a very good laugh about it. But
we had a good time playing that game. Yeah.
That was true. It was truly excellent. It really was.
Yeah, really.
So it's your turn, Robert, to run a one shot. That's the point.
Okay. I got a couple in the chamber, so I'll put that out.
I was joking. That's no pressure. But if you want to, that's great. But don't
too fucking bad. Yeah. Do you want to do Haunted Toy Shop or Haunted Lighthouse?
Oh shit.
Toy House, got it.
Oh no, Lighthouse, because there's a toy one shot that Scott mentioned that he might want to look at in the future.
Does his include Build-A-Bear? Because mine includes Build-A-Bear, and it's nightmarish.
Oh hell, let's do that then. That just tickles my fancy.
Yeah. You know anyway, me, I'm all about tickle.
Anyway, that's it for our discussion on West Marches and the Tangent Express. Thanks, Robert, for choosing this topic, for workshopping your homebrew, and for supporting the Patreon. And thanks to all the listeners for listening to another episode of the It's a Mimic podcast. If you'd like to support us, we have a donate button on our website, itsamimic.com, a store with some It's a Mimic merch, and a Patreon. This episode and others can also be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and most other podcast apps. Thanks again for listening to It's a Mimic, where you never know what you're going to get. That's all for this Platinum Greatwyrm episode of the It's a Mimic podcast. This episode and others can also be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and most other podcast apps. Please take a second to engage with a like, follow, subscribe, comment, or review to help push our engagement. Thanks for listening to It's a Mimic, where you never know what you're going to get.
Okay. So I have a dog. And she is two dogs, but she, the one who's insane, is half husky, half golden retriever. And so she's all of the energy of a golden retriever and all of the psychotic neuroses of a husky and all the energy of a husky, to be frank. And she loses her mind anytime something goes by the back door, goes by the front door to bark at. And there was a snail slowly making its way across my back patio. And so she's been barking at it for like 10 minutes now because it's a snail, so it's still there.
I don't think you understand, though. There was a snail.
There was a goddamn snail. Yeah. That was the snail from the you get $2 million and a snail hunts you and is going to kill you. She read that story on the internet and now she's worried about us. I'll post a random picture of her in the Discord. I think that's going to be my new thing. It's just, whenever we record one of these, I'll post a random picture from our discussions with no explanation, like we did with the clown photos.
Yeah. Does your mystery dog have a name?
Her name is Juniper.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, we have a giant hill of juniper out back, and I mean, she is an absolutely beautiful dog. She looks like a golden wolf or a coyote, and she is wildly insane. And if we let her sleep out of her crate at night, she wouldn't sleep. She would sit by my side of the bed, and she would stare at me and pant and wait to eat me. I think I don't know. She's a nut job. So.